I was 22 when this happened, still a senior at Ohio State, driving back home to Cincinnati for the weekend. It was early October, one of those nights when the rain doesn't just fall, it punishes you, hammering the windshield like it's got a personal grudge. I'd left campus too late, got caught in the storm halfway through, and now the road felt like the loneliest place in Ohio. Just me, my battered Honda, and the occasional freight truck tearing past in the opposite lane, their headlights slicing through the dark like brief angry ghosts. I wasn't in any rush. I had a podcast playing low, a half-empty bag of beef jerky on the passenger seat, and a thermos of coffee I'd already drained. I was tired, but wired. My eyes were gritty, my hands restless on the wheel, and all I wanted was to push through the last hour of the drive. That's when I first saw him. Around 11:30 p.m., maybe a little later. He was standing just off the shoulder beneath one of those weathered green highway signs whose letters have faded to the color of old moss. At first, I thought he was just a trick of the rain and my headlights, maybe a fence post or a tree stump. But as I got closer, he resolved into a man clutching a duffel bag, one arm raised, not quite waving, not quite shielding his face from the rain. Something about the way he stood, utterly still in that violent downpour, made me instinctively ease off the gas. I don't usually stop for hitchhikers. I've always told myself it's not worth the risk. But that night, I don't know. Something in me shifted. Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was that raw edge the storm had carved into my nerves. Maybe I just didn't want to be alone. I rolled down the passenger side window. Rain blew in sideways. "You okay out here?" I called. He looked about mid-60s, face lined and weathered like old leather, gray hair plastered to his forehead. His flannel shirt was soaked through, clinging to his frame like a second skin. He didn't smile, didn't say much at all, just nodded and said, in a voice so flat it was almost a murmur, "Car broke down, couple miles back, headed to a motel off exit 212. "Got a name?" I asked. "Ray," he said. Just Ray. No last name. There was a strange hesitation before he got in, like he was making sure I was real. Then he opened the door, tossed in the dripping duffel, and slid into the seat. He didn't even shiver. The smell that came with him was odd. Not just rain and damp clothes, but something deeper. Wet pine, faint smoke, and that dry, musty scent of an attic that's been sealed for decades. The next 20 minutes were silent. Ray didn't ask where I was headed, didn't thank me, didn't move much at all. His hands were folded neatly in his lap, eyes fixed on the black smear of the road ahead. Every time lightning lit the sky, I glanced over. He never reacted, never blinked, just sat there like he was waiting for something I couldn't see. I tried asking a few things, where exactly his car was, if he'd called anyone, but his answers were clipped and vague. "It's back there. Don't have a phone. Just need a place to sleep." The way he said it, mechanical, almost rehearsed, scraped against something in me. Still, I told myself he was probably just cold, shaken, maybe embarrassed. When I pulled into the Edgeway Motel, a sad little strip of flickering neon and maybe 5 cars in the lot, he unbuckled without a word, just opened the door, grabbed his bag, and walked toward the office without looking back. I was about to pull out when I noticed something on the floor by the passenger seat. A wallet. Dark brown leather, cracked at the edges, one corner soaked from the rain. Ray must have dropped it getting out. I didn't think twice. I threw the car in reverse and parked near the office again. Honestly, part of me felt relieved to have a reason to go back. That exit felt strange the moment I'd taken it, and I hadn't liked the way he'd left. And maybe, I was curious. The lobby was dim, reeking of bleach and cigarette smoke. A tarnished bell sat on the desk. I tapped it once. A short woman in her 50s came from the back, looking like she'd been holding this place together by sheer willpower. "I just dropped off a guy named Ray," I said, holding up the wallet. "Think he forgot this." She tilted her head, frowning. "What room's he in?" "Not sure," I said. But he walked in, maybe 5 minutes ago. Something in her face changed. She went pale, just for a second, and then stepped back like I'd said something dangerous. "What did he look like?" she asked. I gave the description: older guy, gray flannel, gray hair, mid-60s, duffel bag, quiet. She stared at me for a long, heavy moment. Then she gave a nervous, almost incredulous laugh. "You're joking." "I'm not," I said. She leaned over the counter, her voice dropping low. "We haven't had anyone by that." The clerk's voice dropped to a near whisper. "No one matching that description has checked in here for months," she said. "And the last person who did disappeared." A chill worked its way up my spine, cold enough to make me swallow before I could speak. She turned and disappeared into the back room. When she came out, she was holding a worn, overstuffed folder, the kind that looks like it's been handled too many times. She flipped it open, and inside was what looked like an incident report. Taped to the page was a printed photo, grainy, but clear enough. My throat went dry the second I saw it. Same face, same shirt, same duffel bag. It was Ray. "No," I said, shaking my head so hard I almost laughed. "That's not possible. I just dropped him off. He was in my car 20 minutes ago." But the clerk only kept shaking her head. "That man vanished 3 months ago," she said. "His car was found abandoned off the highway, no sign of him. Police searched the woods, dragged the river. Nothing. Not a trace." I must have looked unhinged, trying to explain myself. My hands fumbled for the one thing that could prove I wasn't making it all up. I pulled the wallet from my jacket pocket and set it on the counter. That's when it got worse. The ID inside was old, so old the laminate had yellowed, issued in the late 80s. The photo was Ray, but younger. Different haircut, fewer lines on his face, but the same eyes, the same rigid stare. Something in me recoiled, an instinct I couldn't name. Suddenly I didn't want to be holding it anymore. It didn't feel found. It felt left. I slid it toward her. She didn't want to touch it either, but eventually she fetched a plastic bag, slipped the wallet inside, and tied the end in a knot. "I'll call the sheriff in the morning," she said. Back in my car, the air felt heavier, like the atmosphere had thickened. The passenger seat was still damp where he'd sat. The rain had stopped, but the world seemed muted. Just buzzing neon, the low hum of my engine. I sat there for a long minute, watching the motel door, waiting for him to step out. He never did. No movement behind the curtains, no footsteps, just stillness. Driving away felt wrong, like walking out of a room before the conversation was over. My rearview mirror became a trap for my eyes. I kept glancing at it, half expecting to see him sitting in the back seat, silent, staring. But it was always empty. The highway felt off. The exits and curves were familiar, but stretched somehow like a photograph taken from the wrong angle. I kept trying to tell myself it was just coincidence, a weird overlap of faces, dates, and bad weather. But the feeling wouldn't leave. It was the sense that for those 20 minutes I'd stepped into a story that wasn't mine, that Ray, whoever, whatever he was, had borrowed my presence just long enough to reach wherever he needed to go, and then vanished. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there in the dark, replaying it all, the silence, the clipped answers, the way he never once looked directly at me. It felt less like he'd been traveling with me, and more like he'd been passing through. A few days later, I called the Edgeway Motel. The clerk remembered me. She said she'd turned the wallet over to the sheriff's department, but then she told me something that made my skin crawl all over again. They said the ID wasn't in the system. No record of the name, no address, nothing. It was as if Ray had never officially existed. It's been almost 2 years now. I still think about him, especially on long, empty drives when rain starts to tap against the windshield the same way it did that night. I never saw Ray again. But sometimes when I pass an old motel or spot someone standing alone by the highway, I catch myself wondering, Was he really a ghost? Or just someone who slipped through a crack in the world that the rest of us can't see? I don't know, but I've never picked up another hitchhiker since. I'm Mark, 34 now, but this happened when I was 29. Back then, my wife Olivia and I had just left Idaho after visiting her sister, driving back home to Colorado. We decided to take the Wyoming route. It was late when we left, around 10:30 p.m., because we figured the roads would be empty and we'd make good time. For a while, that plan worked. Life was simple then. No kids yet. Just us, our golden retriever Daisy curled up in the back seat, and the comfortable rhythm of a marriage not yet tested by anything truly frightening. If you'd asked me that morning what the scariest thing in my life was, I probably would have said taxes. I had no idea that by the end of the night, I'd never look at an empty highway the same way again. It was close to midnight when it started, somewhere not far from a little town called Rollins. If you've driven through Wyoming at night, you know the kind of emptiness I'm talking about. No streetlights, just cracked asphalt stretching into blackness and maybe a flash of glowing animal eyes in the brush. We were 40 minutes past the last gas station when Olivia noticed headlights in the rear view. At first, we thought nothing of it. Rare to see another vehicle, but not impossible. Then the shape of the vehicle came into focus. A black pickup, older model, maybe a Dodge or Ford, closing in fast. No lane change, no turn signal. Just barreling straight up behind us and staying there, so close it felt like it was trying to crawl into our trunk. I tapped my brakes lightly, a quick, "I see you" signal. Nothing. The truck didn't slow down. Instead, its high beams snapped on, flooding our car with a harsh white glare that made every shadow in the cabin vanish. Olivia twisted in her seat, shielding her eyes. "What is this guy's problem?" "Road rage, probably," I muttered, forcing my voice to stay calm. I flipped my blinker, eased onto the shoulder to let him pass. He didn't. He slowed with us, staying exactly where he was, an unmoving shadow with blinding lights. I waved him forward. Still nothing. The heavy hum of his engine seemed to thrum through my chest. My jaw tightened. I pulled back onto the road and sped up, 60, 70, pushing 80. But every increase I made, he matched. Always the same distance. Always those lights burning into us. By now, Olivia was fully turned around in her seat, straining to make out his face. But the glare was a wall. No plate, no silhouette, no driver. Just the square glow of those headlights, unblinking. It stopped feeling like a bad driver and started feeling like something else. The next exit appeared like a lifeline, a narrow 2-lane back road heading east. I took it without hesitation, thinking if it was just coincidence, he'd keep going straight. He didn't. His headlights swung right along with us. No pause. "Mark." Olivia's voice was low, almost flat. "He's following us." Something about the way she said it, like a truth settling into place, sent a cold rush through me. This road had nothing. No houses, no signs, just flat land, endless fences, and rusting barbed wire cutting across the fields. I tried calling 911. No bars. Olivia checked hers. Nothing. I stared at those empty signal lines like they might change if I willed it hard enough. That's when the truck did something that made my blood run colder than the air outside. The headlights vanished. One moment they were there. The next, just blackness, no glow, no sound of an engine. Where did he go? Olivia's fingers dug into my arm. I didn't answer. I didn't know. I eased off the gas, scanning the dark behind us. For a second, I let myself think maybe he'd turned off, then, bam, headlights again. Only this time they were much closer, and I hadn't heard him approach. He must have coasted in the dark. No lights. No sound. Just waiting. My pulse slammed in my ears. I floored it and yanked the wheel hard right onto a dirt road I didn't recognize. The tires crunched into gravel, a cloud of dust exploding in our wake. Daisy barked frantically from the back seat. I didn't care where the road went. I just needed it to go somewhere else. The dirt path wound through what looked like abandoned ranch land. Tall, dry grass whipped against the sides of the car. Fence posts flashed past like jagged teeth. In the rear view, the truck was still there. Closer now. Olivia was shaking, tears pooling in her eyes. "Do something, Mark. Please." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But what was there to do? No service, no buildings. Just us and a truck that clearly didn't want to talk. I swerved hard, hoping to throw him off. He swerved with me, perfectly in sync, like he knew my moves before I made them. Then I saw it, a break in the barbed wire ahead. The fence had collapsed in one section, like some old tractor had busted through years ago. I didn't think. I just cranked the wheel and went for it. The car bounced violently over ruts and dry earth. Olivia screamed. Something heavy from the back seat flew into the front. Daisy yelped, claws scrambling against the seat as she tried to keep her balance. I barely had time to glance back before my stomach dropped. The truck had followed us without hesitation, plowing straight through the same gap in the fence. Dust billowed up behind it like smoke from something burning. That's when I knew for sure. This wasn't random. Whoever was driving that thing wasn't just stubborn, they were committed. We tore across what looked like an old cattle field. Even in the frantic blur of headlights and shadows, I caught flashes of pale bone littering the ground. I swear I saw a cow skull half buried in the dirt, its hollow eyes reflecting faint light as we passed. An old windmill stood ahead, its rusted blades turning slow and uneven in the wind, like it was mocking the panic in our car. A dirt path veered left toward a dark line of trees. I floored it, feeling every brutal jolt through the steering column and into my bones. But the truck was still there. I couldn't see it clearly anymore, but I could feel it. The same way prey feels the predator behind it. It wasn't closing in yet. It was circling, drawing this out, making sure we understood who was in control. Then, hope, or something pretending to be it. A sagging wooden structure appeared out of the darkness, maybe an old barn or feed shed, leaning on itself like it had been abandoned decades ago. I cut the wheel and slid in behind it, gravel spitting out under the tires. I killed the engine and lights in one motion. Olivia clutched Daisy to her chest, her sobs muffled against the dog's fur. I heard her whispering prayers she hadn't spoken since her mom's funeral, her voice trembling like the air between us. We waited. Nothing. No engine. No footsteps. Just the whistle of the wind and the faint groan of that damned windmill in the distance. The silence felt thick, almost physical, like it was pressing against my eardrums. I cracked my window. Still nothing. My heart pounded so hard it was almost embarrassing. I told Olivia I was going to take a look. She grabbed my sleeve with a grip so tight it hurt. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I have to," I whispered. She didn't answer, just stared at me with wet, terrified eyes, until I slowly slipped free of her grip. The cold night air hit me like I'd stepped into an ice bath. My boots sank into the soft dirt as I crept along the side of the structure, every step careful, deliberate. I edged to the corner and peeked out. There it was, the black truck. It sat maybe 50 yards away, engine off, headlights dark. But inside, in the bed of the truck, was a faint red glow, like the tip of a cigarette. Only it wasn't in the driver's seat. It was further back, low, like someone was sitting cross-legged in the bed, just watching. I don't know if it was a person. I don't know if it was human. But the stillness of it made my skin crawl. The way it didn't move, didn't shift or react. It felt less like I was looking at a man and more like I was looking at a trap. I backed away as slowly as I could, each step feeling like it took a full minute. My breath stayed shallow, like even exhaling too loud might draw its attention. When I slid back into the car, Olivia looked at me like she already knew the answer. "He's just sitting there," I whispered. She stared. "What does that mean?" I had no answer. We stayed put for maybe another 10 minutes, barely breathing. The truck didn't move. No engine, no lights. Just that single stubborn red glow hanging in the dark like an ember that refused to die. Finally, Olivia spoke. We should run for it. Every instinct I had screamed that leaving the car was worse, but the gas gauge was kissing empty, and I knew we couldn't sit there until sunrise. I remembered passing a ranch sign maybe 5 miles back before we'd left the road. We decided to try. We took Daisy, our phones, and a flashlight, and slipped out the opposite side of the barn, avoiding the truck entirely. The field felt endless. Every few steps, my mind conjured shapes in the dark, holes big enough to break a leg, a snake nest hidden in the grass, or worse. Every sound made us whip our heads around. Every gust of wind felt like it carried a whisper just behind our ears. After what felt like hours, though it could only have been one, we saw it. A single dim porch light in the distance, steady, unmoving. We ran. It was an old farmhouse, weathered but cared for. An older couple answered, eyes widening at the sight of us. They ushered us in without a single question. The husband, Jim, handed me the landline, and I called the sheriff. Explaining it out loud made it sound insane. A truck with no plates, no driver we could see, chasing us through nowhere. The sheriff arrived about 40 minutes later. He drove out to the field, came back saying there was nothing, no truck, no tire tracks, no broken fence, nothing at all. To this day, I don't know who or what was behind that wheel. Maybe it was someone messing with us. Maybe it was something else entirely. I do know this. I've never driven through Wyoming at night again. Olivia still wakes up sometimes, shaking, mumbling about the red glow. And me? Sometimes I still jolt awake in the dark, sure I can hear tires crunching slowly across gravel outside the house, like whatever was in that truck is still out there, waiting for the next couple to take the wrong exit on the wrong stretch of highway. I was 32 when it happened. Early September, the kind of sticky Texas heat that makes your shirt glue itself to your back before you've even had your morning coffee. I'd just started a solo road trip after walking away from a soul-sucking job and an even worse breakup back in Austin. I wasn't out here to find myself or any of that romantic nonsense. I just needed to get away from people for a while. No real destination, just a vague plan of hitting a few state parks and maybe checking out Marfa if I got that far. My ride was a second-hand Ford Escape, still smelling faintly of the previous owner's cigarette habit, and a cooler wedged in the backseat full of snacks and lukewarm soda. I had the kind of restlessness that makes you take detours just to see what's down a road you've never driven before. That morning, I'd been on the road since 7 a.m., the low hum of the highway keeping my thoughts at bay. The only stop I made was for gas, at a faded little station near a place called Pottet. The sign was so bleached by the sun, it looked like a ghost of whatever logo it used to be. One pump worked. The other was cocooned in yellow caution tape, swaying a little in the warm breeze. The attached convenience store was tiny, its air thick with the smell of old motor oil, powdered donuts, and something faintly metallic. As I topped off my tank, I saw her. She was standing off to the side near a silver sedan with its hood up, arms crossed tight over her chest. Strands of damp hair clung to her face in the heat. At first I thought she was just a local dealing with car trouble, but she wasn't even looking at the engine. Her gaze kept darting up and down the road, sharp and jerky, like she was waiting for someone, or bracing for them. Dark green hoodie, despite the heat. Fingers twitching like she couldn't stand still. I told myself to mind my business. I don't pick up strangers. Not my thing. But when I stepped inside the store, she followed. I was paying for a bottle of water when her voice cut in, soft but sudden. "You heading west?" I froze. Something in me whispered, "Lie. Say no. Say you're going back the other way." But my head nodded before I could stop it. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Said her name was Rachel. Offered me $20 for a ride to a town about an hour away, somewhere off Route 90. I told her to keep her money. I'm not sure why. Maybe guilt, maybe the look in her eyes, haunted and hollow. We got on the road. She barely spoke, just clutched a battered canvas tote like it was all she had left in the world. As the miles slid by, she loosened up a fraction, but only just. Every time a big pickup truck passed, she'd flinch and check the rear window. After half an hour of silence, I finally asked, "Is someone after you?" She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was barely a whisper. "If a man named Curtis shows up, don't tell him you saw me." Her voice cracked on his name. My stomach sank. I didn't push for details, I didn't need to. I'd worked at a women's shelter years ago. I'd seen that kind of fear before. I'd been hoping she was just someone with bad luck and a dead battery. But now, this was worse. "I don't know Curtis," I told her, "but you're safe with me." I meant it. I didn't realize then how wrong I'd be, that Curtis was already looking for her, and helping her would pull me into something far darker than I'd ever imagined. We rolled into a diner around 1 p.m., the kind with a metal roof, faded Coca-Cola signs in the windows, and a parking lot that crunched under your shoes. The place was called Gertie's, and only 3 cars sat outside. It felt quiet, safe. Rachel hadn't said much since bringing up Curtis. Inside, the air smelled of fried food and burnt coffee. A waitress with dyed red hair and laugh lines that didn't look much used seated us in a booth by the window. Rachel ordered fries she didn't touch. I tried to lighten the mood, tossing out small talk, but her attention kept drifting to the door. The tension was back in her shoulders, radiating like static in the air. I made the mistake of leaving her alone, just to run to the bathroom. I swear I wasn't gone 5 minutes. When I came back, the booth was empty. Her tote bag was still there. My stomach dropped. Through the window, I spotted her by the payphone at the edge of the lot. A man stood 10 feet from her, broad-shouldered, denim jacket, balding. Even from behind, he radiated a kind of meanness. The way he leaned toward her, looming, made my chest go tight. I stepped outside, trying to keep my voice even. "Everything okay?" The man turned. His eyes were flat, cold. "Just talking to my wife," he said. Rachel's eyes met mine, and she shook her head. Just once. Small. Sharp. "Don't." "She's with me," I said. He tilted his head slightly. "You picked her up?" His tone made it sound like a fact, not a question, like someone had told him already. "Yeah," I said, gripping her tote. His gaze flicked down to it. Something ugly passed over his face before he forced a smile. It didn't touch his eyes. "Thanks for taking care of her," he said. "I'll take it from here." And then Rachel ran. Not toward me, toward the back of the diner. I didn't think. I just ran after her. Behind me, I heard him curse, boots pounding the gravel. We rounded the side of the building, my lungs burned, my legs screamed. Behind the diner was a scrappy patch of trees and a drainage ditch. Rachel didn't hesitate. She slid down the slope, nearly twisting her ankle, then disappeared into the brush. I tore after her, branches clawing at my arms, spider webs breaking across my face, trying to keep sight of that dark green hoodie darting ahead. My heart was hammering so hard it felt like it was choking me. Behind us, his voice cut through the trees, closer than I wanted to believe, maybe 20 seconds back, maybe less. And I knew in that instant, with a sick certainty, that if he caught us, this wouldn't end with shouting. I'd seen men like him before. I knew exactly what they were capable of. The woods behind the diner weren't much, just a narrow strip of trees and snarled undergrowth between 2 properties. But we pushed deeper. I kept expecting to break out into someone's backyard or smack into a fence, but it just kept going. Branches slapped against my face, snagged at my shirt. My legs burned trying to keep up with Rachel. She ran like she'd done it before, like every turn and stumble was muscle memory. After what felt like forever, maybe 5 minutes, we dropped down into a dry creek bed. Broken beer bottles glittered in the dirt, cigarette packs flattened and damp. We ducked under a fallen tree, crouching low, breathing hard enough to make my chest ache. Rachel's hands were trembling so badly I thought she might pass out. I leaned toward her, whispering, Was that him? She didn't look at me, just bit her lip until it broke and nodded once. We stayed like that, pressed into the dirt, listening. No footsteps, no branches snapping. Maybe we'd lost him. Maybe he'd given up. But Rachel was still staring dead ahead, her whole body locked like she was bracing for a bullet. "He has a tracker," she whispered finally, her voice so thin I almost didn't hear it. "I didn't think he'd use it." The words hit me like a gut punch. "What kind of tracker?" She didn't answer right away. Then she reached into the hoodie pocket and pulled out a phone I hadn't seen before. "Not mine," she said, her voice shaking. "His. I thought I ditched it yesterday. He must have planted another." And just like that, I understood why he'd found us so fast. That cold smile at the diner, it hadn't been surprise. It had been confirmation. "Get rid of it," I told her. She nodded, then whipped her arm and flung the phone so hard it cracked against a rock in the creek bed. Then she dug into her tote bag and pulled out another phone. I didn't ask where she got it. I didn't want to know. We stayed hidden a little longer, until the silence felt real, not just like a pause in the chase. Then we moved, keeping to the tree line until we found an abandoned trailer, busted out windows, a rusting satellite dish leaning off its mount. Rachel crawled underneath and shoved her tote deep into the shadows. "If he finds me again," she whispered, "at least he won't get this." I didn't ask what was in the bag. I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. "We'll get you somewhere safe," I told her. I meant it. We cut across scrubland until we reached the edge of a service road. My keys were still in my pocket. Thank God I'd left the car locked. We circled wide, coming up on the diner from the opposite side, scanning for any sign of that denim jacket. Nothing. Either he'd gone inside or taken off, thinking she'd run the other way. I hit the unlock button from 20 feet out. We sprinted for the car like we were breaking out of prison. Once we were back on the road, I didn't speak for 10 miles. Neither did she. My hands were clamped to the wheel, trembling so badly I had to flex them to keep control. I've had anxiety before, but this was different. This wasn't fear. It was rage. Rage that a man like him could walk into a parking lot in broad daylight, speak like he owned her, and leave without anyone stopping him. We didn't slow down until we hit Hondo, a bigger town with more traffic, more eyes. I pulled into the police station lot ready to march her inside. But her hand shot out, gripping my arm. "No cops," she said, panic sparking in her voice. "He's a volunteer firefighter. They know him here. They won't help me." Her voice cracked and I believed her. Curtis hadn't looked at her like an angry boyfriend. He'd looked at her like property, like someone he knew he could drag back without anyone asking questions. So I did the only thing I could think of. I drove her to a small, run-down motel just outside of town. Paid in cash. We picked a fake name for her. I gave her my backup phone, scribbled down every shelter and hotline I could remember from my old job. I couldn't stay. I knew that. But I wasn't leaving her with nothing. Before I left, she hugged me. Sudden, tight, trembling. "You didn't have to stop," she whispered. "Most people wouldn't have." I didn't know what to say, so I told her the truth. I'm glad I did. And I meant it, even with the fear, even with the chaos. That night I drove another 100 miles before I let myself pull over and cry. I didn't know if Curtis was still looking for her, or if he'd slunk back to whatever place let him act like a king. But I knew Rachel was smart, and she wasn't alone anymore, not really, she had a chance. A few weeks later, I got a text from an unknown number. "I made it. Thank you." No name, no location. I read it 3 times, then deleted it. I didn't need to reply. I just needed to know. I haven't heard from her since. I don't know what happened to Curtis, and I hope I never do. But every time I stop for gas in a small town, I remember her face. The panic, the strength under it, the silence she wore like armor. And I wonder how many women are out there right now, running, hiding, praying for a stranger to slow down. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to pick someone up off the side of the road. But I did. And I still think about what might have happened if I hadn't. If I'd just kept driving. What she'd already survived. What she might not have. And I'll never forget the look in Curtis's eyes when he realized she was slipping away. It wasn't anger, it was fear. Because for once, someone got away. And I hope to God she stays gone. Back in late September 2019, I was working nights as a delivery driver for one of those third-party apps. I'd just moved to Nashville after dropping out of college, trying to figure out what the hell I was doing with my life. Nothing glamorous. Most of my nights were spent dropping off burgers and wings to drunk college kids or exhausted nurses halfway through a double shift. The kind of job that gives you way too much time to think and nowhere near enough money to stop worrying. That night it was pushing 11:30 p.m., and I'd already decided I was done after one last drop. I'd just handed off an order at a roadside motel near the interstate when my phone pinged. A decent payout, but the address was way out there. 40 minutes outside the city, technically still in the delivery zone, but it might as well have been another state. No gate code, no delivery instructions, just a customer name. D. Monroe. And an address on a back road I didn't recognize. I hesitated. Orders usually popped up closer to downtown where you could see the skyline and the streetlights didn't just end. This one was the opposite, out toward the kind of country roads where the air feels heavier and the dark feels older. But I was tired, low on gas and ready to be done, so I hit accept, swung by a 24-hour diner for the pickup, and started the drive. The first leg was normal. Few turns off the highway, past a couple of closed gas stations and dark subdivisions. Then the streetlights thinned out until there weren't any. My high beams lit up more bugs than asphalt, and the road narrowed until it felt like the trees were pressing in, their branches tangled overhead. The GPS started acting up, lagging, spinning, rerouting me for no reason. My music cut out, leaving just the hum of the engine and the crunch of gravel when I hit the occasional shoulder. Finally, the GPS voice announced, "You have arrived." But there was no house, just a dirt driveway, barely wide enough for a single car, disappearing into the woods. I sat there, foot on the brake, double-checking the screen. Same address. No mistake. The house had to be at the end. I eased in slowly, the gravel popping under my tires. Branches scraped along the sides of my car, the sound too close, too sharp. No mailbox, no lights, just darkness thick enough to feel. After a couple of tight bends, I saw it. A farmhouse, tucked far back. Chipped white paint flaking off in big curls, roof sagging like it was exhaling its last breath. No porch light, no vehicles, no sound but my own engine. I pulled up, shut the car off, but left the headlights on. I can't explain why. Something in me just didn't want to lose the light. The air outside was damp and heavy, carrying that swampy, rotting wood smell you get near creeks. The porch steps sagged under my weight, boards creaking in protest. I knocked once. Nothing. Knocked again, harder, and called, "Delivery for Monroe." Still nothing. I was halfway to leaving the bag on the porch when I heard it. A faint, sharp creak from inside like a floorboard under slow, deliberate weight. I froze. It wasn't the wind. "Hey," I called, my voice louder than I meant. "Just dropping off your order." No response. Then it came again, this time not just one creak but several. Slow, uneven steps moving across what I imagined were warped, dusty boards. Every instinct told me to turn around and go. But some part of me, against all reason, thought maybe it was just an old man taking his time, maybe hard of hearing, so I stepped off to the side, leaning toward a window. The glass was filthy, streaked in a way that made the light from my headlights smear and scatter. I could barely make out shapes inside, until I saw it. A flicker of movement, there and gone so fast I almost convinced myself I imagined it. My whole spine prickled cold. I backed toward the steps, voice tight. "All right," I said, forcing steadiness I didn't feel. "I'm leaving it here." I dropped the bag right there on the porch. Didn't wait for a tip, didn't wait for anything. My hands were trembling as I turned and walked quickly back to the car, the boards groaning under each step. The second I slid inside, I slammed the locks down. My breath came in short, uneven bursts, and I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. I was about to throw the car in reverse when the porch light flickered, not fully, just a quick dying zap, like a bulb trying and failing to wake up. Then darkness again. But in that fraction of a second, I saw something that still knots my stomach when I think about it. A silhouette inside the house, standing in the hallway, motionless, watching. I couldn't see a face, just the long, tall outline of someone. They didn't move, didn't tilt their head, didn't step forward. We stared at each other, separated by my windshield and that dusty glass, for what felt like an eternity, but must have been only a couple seconds. Then the light went dead, and the shape was gone. I didn't think. I jammed the car into reverse so hard I nearly clipped a tree backing out. My tires spat gravel as I tore down that narrow driveway, the branches whipping against the side of my car like fingers trying to catch hold. The whole drive back was a blur. My hands clamped so tightly on the wheel they ached, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds, convinced something might be following. When the first streetlights of the city came back into view, it felt like surfacing from underwater. I pulled into a gas station, parked under the harsh white glow of the fluorescents, and just sat there, breathing like I'd run a mile. My phone was still in the mount, the delivery app open. I went to mark the order as incomplete, only it was already marked delivered, with a 5-star rating. The customer's name was gone, replaced by a blank space. No record. No history. It was like the order had never existed. That's when the real sickness set in. Not fear, not adrenaline, but the creeping realization that whatever I'd walked into didn't want to be remembered. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure in the hallway standing perfectly still, as if it knew I'd be back. I didn't tell my roommate. I didn't tell my mom when she called the next morning. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the place was abandoned and some squatter had been trying to scare me off. But deep down, that explanation felt paper thin. The next day, against my usual instincts, I called the non-emergency line for the county sheriff's office. I didn't give them my full name, just said I was a delivery driver and had a strange experience at a farmhouse near Halcombe Road. The dispatcher paused, then asked me to confirm the exact address. When I did, her tone shifted, calm, but with a weight behind it. She told me I needed to come in and speak to someone in person. That made my skin crawl even more. I went the following day, meeting with a detective in a small, windowless interview room. He didn't say much at first, just had me walk him through exactly what I'd seen, right down to the time. When I finished, he exhaled slowly and said the place had been under investigation for months. It had been seized just days before after a raid tied it to a string of kidnappings in the area. The farmhouse was supposed to be empty. No one was authorized to be there, but someone had come back. They'd found food wrappers, fresh footprints, and a broken back window. I'd probably shown up right as whoever it was had returned. Whether it was one of the original suspects or someone else involved, no one could say. Then the detective's tone shifted again. "It's like someone lured you there," he said. When he asked to see the delivery record, I told him it had vanished. He had one of their tech guys check my app history, but there was nothing. No pings, no route log, no GPS trace. Like the night never happened. He said he believed me, but his eyes said he didn't know what to make of it. Before I left, he told me flat out that I was lucky, that I'd probably arrived before something worse could happen. I walked out of that station with the cold, hollow feeling that I'd brushed against something I was never meant to see. It's been years, but I still think about that night. I quit delivery driving soon after. Can't bring myself to drive down dark country roads anymore. If I see a flicker of light in a window out there, I feel that same knot in my stomach. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I'd knocked one more time, or if I'd waited on that porch just a little longer. I never got answers. I'm not sure I want them, but I know this much. Something was in that house, and it was expecting me. I don't usually share things like this, but it's been sitting heavy on my chest for almost a year. I'm 28, live in Dallas, and last summer I decided to drive alone to visit my cousin in Little Rock. I left work late and figured I'd just power through the night. It's only about a 5-hour drive. Around 1:30 a.m., somewhere deep in rural Arkansas, my eyelids started getting dangerously heavy. The kind of tired where you feel your head dip and snap back up. I knew I couldn't risk dozing off behind the wheel, so I pulled into a small rest stop off I-30. It was one of those forgotten places. Single bathroom building, a couple of flickering streetlights. No vending machines, no attendants. Just silence and trees pressing in on all sides. The kind of spot you wouldn't think twice about during the day, but at night, it felt different. There was only one other car in the lot. An old beige sedan with rusted rims, parked 2 spaces away. I figured someone was sleeping in it. I backed into a spot near the bathroom, killed the engine, and let the quiet settle in. The air outside was heavy and wet, thick with humidity. Cicadas screamed so loud it felt like they were competing for some invisible prize. I sat scrolling through my phone, debating whether to close my eyes for a few minutes or get out to stretch my legs. That's when I saw movement in my side mirror. A woman was standing just a few feet from my window. Older, maybe late 70s, thin frame, wispy gray hair pulled back in a loose braid. She wore a pale blue cardigan that looked far too warm for the sticky heat. She didn't seem like she was trying to scare me. If anything, she looked scared herself. I cracked the window just enough to hear her without giving her a full opening. Her voice was low, unsteady, like she was terrified someone else might overhear. "Honey, you need to go," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder toward the tree line. "Don't stay here. Just get back on the road, please." I asked if she was okay. She shook her head quickly, her braid swaying. "Please, go now." It wasn't aggressive and it wasn't panicked. It was desperate. Like she already knew how this night ended and was begging me to change it. I thanked her, told her I'd be fine. She just stood there for a moment, her pale eyes fixed on mine before turning and walking slowly toward the trees. No car, no phone, just swallowed by the dark. I stayed frozen in my seat for a solid minute, engine off, replaying it in my head. A part of me wanted to trust her. Every nerve in my body was whispering that something was wrong. But my rational side cut in. Maybe she was paranoid, confused, homeless, just afraid of being out here alone at night. Still, I decided I'd use the bathroom quick and get back on the road. I grabbed my keys and reached for the door handle. That's when headlights exploded across my windshield. A big black truck had pulled in, no plates I could see, 2 men inside. Neither looked at me right away. I froze. Something about the way they rolled in. It wasn't right. They didn't take a parking space. The truck stopped sideways, its nose aimed directly at my front bumper, blocking me in. The passenger was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a stained white tank top. He leaned forward, forearms resting on the dash like he was studying me. The driver was older, stockier, with a trucker hat pulled low. I could just make out the red glow of a cigarette between his fingers. No one moved. For several long seconds, it was like we were in some silent standoff. My hand stayed on the key, but I hadn't started the car yet. My heart thudded so hard it rattled the steering wheel under my palms. Then the passenger opened his door. He stepped out slow, casual, like he had all the time in the world. He didn't look directly at me. Instead, he strolled around the truck bed, pretending to check something. I remember the sound first. His fingers dragging slowly along the side of the truck bed, tapping every few steps. Not random, deliberate, sharp. Each tap felt like punctuation, like he was sending a message I wasn't meant to understand. Then the driver got out, stretching in this lazy, exaggerated way, like he'd just woken up from a nap. They exchanged a quick glance, the kind you only see between people who've done something together before. Rehearsed. Efficient. That was the moment I knew this wasn't chance. I snapped out of whatever stunned fog I'd been in and turned the key. The engine sputtered. Once. Twice. My stomach sank. I'd had zero issues the entire trip, and now it was hesitating like it was deciding whether to help me or not. That single second stretched into an eternity before it finally roared to life. I threw it into reverse, but the truck was still there, blocking the only exit lane. The passenger started toward my window, hands buried in his pockets, saying nothing. His pace was slow, casual, too casual for the situation. I didn't wait to see what came next. I cranked the wheel hard, reversing into the space behind me so fast I nearly clipped a trash bin. Slamming it into drive, I aimed straight for the grass at the edge of the lot. The tires bit into the curb, and for a terrifying moment, I thought I'd fishtail. But the car caught traction, bounding over the grassy divider, and I shot back onto the entrance ramp without looking back. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. My chest was tight, every breath shallow. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood, just to stop myself from panicking. I drove like that for miles, blowing past exits, signs blurring past unread. I was afraid to stop, afraid to even blink for too long. The worst part? I had no idea where the old woman had gone. She wasn't in the trees. Her car wasn't in the lot. It was as if she'd never been there at all. 40 minutes later, I pulled into a brightly lit Love's truck stop just outside Hope, Arkansas. I parked directly under the glare of the front lights, locked the doors, and sat there shaking. I kept replaying it in my head. Her warning, the men, the way they moved like a team who'd done this before. Eventually, I went inside, grabbed a bottle of water, and tried to steady my voice as I asked the cashier, "You know if there's any rest stops between here and Prescott?" He didn't even have to think about it. "Only one I can think of, but it's been shut down over 2 years now. People kept getting robbed out there. Some even went missing. Whole place is boarded up now." He said it like it was small-town gossip. I stood there staring at him, the hum of the coolers in the background suddenly deafening. I wanted to ask him 100 questions but couldn't even figure out where to start. Back in my car, I pulled up the map on my phone. That rest stop wasn't marked, not on any updated GPS listing, but I had been there. I'd seen the building, the lights, the woman, the men. They were real. And then a thought hit me so hard my skin prickled. What if she had been one of the missing? Someone who'd fallen into that same trap and was trying to stop it from happening again? I don't believe in ghosts, but I also don't believe in coincidences like that. When I told my cousin the next morning, she went pale. Her husband, Matt, used to work in law enforcement. He said that stretch of Arkansas had a string of disappearances in the early 2010s. Mostly travelers, mostly women. They never caught anyone. Some people believed the victims had simply run away, but Matt said a few of the stories sounded too familiar. One detail kept surfacing. Several of the missing were last seen at or near that same rest area. I reported what happened, but without plates or clear descriptions, there wasn't much they could do. Still, Matt passed my story along to an old friend at the state police. Now, I don't stop at rest areas, not even during the day. I keep my tank above half and map out every major gas station before I leave. I wish I'd listened to her the moment she spoke. I don't know what would have happened if I'd gotten out of my car, or even hesitated a few seconds longer. But I know this. She saved me. Whoever or whatever she was, she saved me. And if even one person reads this and thinks twice before stopping alone in the middle of nowhere, maybe she's still saving people, even now. I've been driving a tow truck for close to 13 years now, mostly along the empty rural stretches of Arizona. Out there, the highways run straight for miles with nothing but dry brush and rust-colored dirt on either side. On some nights, you can go a full hour without passing another set of headlights. I've always preferred the late shift. Less traffic, fewer angry commuters flipping you off. It's just me, the open road, and the occasional stranded motorist who thought they could push it without gas. That night I was working the usual late hours. I was 42, newly divorced, trying to keep myself too busy to think about the empty house I went home to. After a while, you get used to the nighttime rhythm. The way the desert hums in silence, how it's so still you can hear your own pulse in your ears. It was a little past 11 when dispatch radioed in. A woman had broken down off Highway 86 about 15 miles west of 3 Points. She was alone. Engine dead. Phone almost out of juice. I remember thinking that was about the worst place to be stranded. Spotty cell service, no street lights, just pitch-black desert and the occasional coyote song drifting in from somewhere unseen. I headed out right away. By the time I spotted the faint blink of hazard lights in the distance, I'd already passed 2 jackrabbits and a fox, their eyes catching my high beams before darting back into the dark. Her car, a silver Honda Civic, was parked crooked on the shoulder, hazard lights flashing in slow, steady beats. She stood beside it with her arms wrapped tight around herself. Mid-20s, maybe. Messy dark hair tied into a loose bun, hoodie and leggings. Not exactly warm enough for the desert chill that creeps in after sunset. She looked cold, sure, but also on edge. I stepped down from my truck and gave her a quick wave. "You the one who called for a tow?" I asked, keeping my tone easy. She nodded but didn't smile. In the brief sweep of my flashlight, I saw her hands shaking. "I'm Rick," I told her. "We'll get you out of here in no time." "Jamie," she said. Her voice was soft, almost flat, and her eyes kept darting down the highway, quick, uneasy glances, like she was either waiting for someone or hoping they wouldn't show. As I leaned over the hood, she spoke again. "Car just died on me. No warning. Just died." I popped the hood and instantly spotted the problem. The battery cable had been loosened, just enough to cut the power. That doesn't happen by accident. I looked back at her. "Did anyone mess with your car before it stopped?" Her answer came too fast. "No." She shook her head hard, eyes sliding away from mine. That's when I noticed the bruise, faint but there, just under her jaw, half hidden by the hood of her sweatshirt. My gut nodded. I didn't push her. "All right," I said, forcing a neutral tone. "Let's get you hooked up." I moved quicker now, the weight of something unspoken pressing into the space between us. I just secured the hook under her bumper when headlights flared in my mirrors. A truck. Coming fast. Way too fast for this road. Jamie went rigid. I stepped slightly in front of her without thinking. The vehicle skidded to a stop behind mine, a dark blue pickup, older model, early 2000s. The driver's door flew open before the engine had even died. A tall, wiry man stepped out, shaved head, big, restless hands that flexed as he walked like he couldn't decide whether to play it cool or lose it completely. "Jamie!" His voice was sharp, cutting through the night. "What the hell is going on?" She didn't answer, just took a small step back, almost behind me now. That told me everything. "You know this guy?" I asked, eyes still on him. A pause. Then, "He's my boyfriend." But there was no conviction in her voice, no warmth. She said it like she was reading from a script someone had shoved into her hands. He took another step forward. "She doesn't need a tow. We got it handled. I'll fix it." The look he gave me was the kind you give a bug, right before you decide whether or not to crush it. I kept my voice level, not giving him the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. "Car's not drivable. Already started hooking it up," I said. His jaw tightened, a little tick, but I caught it. Guys like him hate being contradicted, especially in front of their target. For a moment, the only sound was the desert wind moving across the asphalt, long enough for the hair on my arms to stand on end. Then he gave me a smile that wasn't a smile at all, just lips peeled back to show teeth. "Why don't you unhook it?" he said, voice smooth but coiled tight, and let her decide. I turned to Jamie, and this time I made sure she met my eyes. "Do you want to go with him?" She didn't speak, didn't even blink. Her pupils were wide, glassy. She stared at him like he was holding a gun, though his hands were empty. That was all I needed. "I think she's safer with me," I said, turning my back to him and walking toward the truck to finish the hookup. That's when he moved, fast. His hand darted into his jacket. I didn't stick around to find out what he was reaching for. I turned into him hard, putting my shoulder into his chest, knocking him sideways into the Civic. Metal groaned and he stumbled, catching himself on the hood but staying upright. "Get in the truck, now!" I shouted to Jamie. She didn't hesitate. She bolted for my cab. He was already reaching into his jacket again when I climbed in after her. Door slammed, locks clicked. My heartbeat was a drum in my ears. Outside, he pounded on the hood, shouting words I didn't bother to make out. I threw the truck into gear and pulled onto the highway, the Civic clattering behind us. In the mirror, I caught one last glimpse of him chasing us for a few strides before the darkness swallowed him. We didn't speak at first, just breathed, shaky, uneven. My eyes kept flicking to the rear view, expecting those headlights to reappear, but the road stayed empty. Jamie stared out the passenger window, her arms locked so tightly around her ribs it looked painful. Her hands trembled in her lap. I reached into the console and offered her a water bottle. "You okay?" She nodded, still not looking at me, then whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't casual. It was heavy, like it had been sitting in her chest for a long time, waiting for someone who'd earned it. I didn't push for more. Sometimes silence is the safest place for someone. But 10 minutes later, she started talking, halting like stepping barefoot over glass. His name was Trent. They'd dated for a few months. When she ended it, he didn't. He started showing up in places he shouldn't be, sending hundreds of texts, calling at all hours. Her parents told her to ignore him. The cops said there was nothing they could do unless he actually did something. That night, she'd been heading to her sister's place in Tucson. Her baby, thank God, had already been picked up by her mom. She hadn't told anyone she was leaving. She thought that would keep her safe. It didn't. Trent had followed her. When she went into a gas station bathroom, he must have popped the hood and loosened the battery cable. "I didn't know he was out there," she said quietly. "I just felt it." We pulled into a small police station outside Tucson around 1 in the morning. I parked, walked her inside, and told the officer exactly what had happened. They took it seriously this time, maybe because I was standing there, maybe because she looked like she'd just crawled out of a nightmare. They brought her into the back to give a statement. I waited in the lobby. When she came out, she didn't just thank me, she hugged me. Not a polite, half-hearted hug. A full, shaking, don't-let-go embrace. "You saved my life," she said. Maybe she was right. But even now, I get chills thinking how close it came to ending differently. I drove back alone, the Civic still hitched behind me. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying the moment his hand disappeared into that jacket, wondering what would have happened if I'd hesitated, if she'd said the wrong thing, if he'd gotten there a few minutes earlier. That night, I learned something. Towing cars isn't always about busted engines and flat tires. Sometimes you roll up on someone's worst nightmare. And sometimes, if you're paying attention, you get the chance to stop it before it becomes a headline. I was 28 when it happened. At the time, I was working remotely for a publishing company and had decided to take a solo road trip from Arizona to visit a friend in Denver. I just crawled out of a bad breakup, and the idea of an open road felt like the kind of therapy I didn't know I needed. I planned my route to cut through some of Colorado's most scenic mountain highways, roads I'd seen in travel blogs, winding through pine-covered slopes and jagged rock faces. It was late October, That strange in-between season when autumn's last gold clings stubbornly to the trees, but the wind already bites like winter. I remember that day with crystal clarity, because it was the first morning I ever saw frost on the inside of my windshield. I'd left my motel around 7 a.m., coffee in hand, music low, trying to let the rhythm of the tires and the mountains unwind the knots in my head. By the time I reached the mountain pass, it was close to 2 in the afternoon. The sun had begun to dip, spilling long, honey-colored beams across the rocky slopes. The road narrowed there, curling sharply along cliffs with very few safe spots to pull over. There weren't many other cars, maybe 1 or 2 in the last half hour, which made the drive feel both peaceful and faintly unsettling. Just me, the wind, and the endless drop at the road's edge. Every so often, I passed signs warning of falling rocks and urging drivers to use the emergency pull-offs only in cases of real trouble. I didn't think much about it until I saw the SUV, dark green, hazard lights blinking, parked at an odd angle on a strip of gravel shoulder up ahead. A man stood next to it, waving both arms like he was flagging down a lifeboat. As I got closer, I could see his face. He looked desperate, genuine distress etched deep into his expression. I slowed instinctively, wrestling with that city-bred caution that says, "Don't stop for strangers," and the quiet rural reality that here, if someone was truly in trouble, help might not come for hours. He stepped closer to the edge of the road as I eased onto the shoulder, stopping a few yards behind his SUV. My pulse ticked up, not from fear exactly, but from that prickling, heightened state when something doesn't feel right, but your brain hasn't put the pieces together yet. I cracked the passenger window just a few inches. He leaned toward the gap, breath puffing against the glass. "My wife," he said, voice trembling. "She's having some kind of, I don't know, medical thing. I can't get her to talk. I don't know what to do." His words tumbled out in short bursts, his eyes darting back toward the SUV as if expecting a scream, or maybe a sudden movement. "Do you have a phone?" I asked. He shook his head. "Dead. You?" I hesitated, then lied. "No." Even now, I can't explain why I said that. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe some part of me sensed something was off. But I did the stupid thing anyway. I opened the door and stepped out. From that angle, I could see into the SUV more clearly. My gut clenched. There was no one inside. The back seats were empty. The front passenger seat was reclined but untouched. No jacket, no purse. Nothing to suggest another person had been there at all. I froze, staring, my mind trying to fit this into the story he'd just told me. He noticed, and his tone shifted, not in words but in energy. His voice got faster, chattier. "She must have, I don't know, gone out to throw up. Maybe wandered off into the trees." He gestured vaguely to the steep slope beside us, thick with pines and jagged boulders. My eyes followed his motion. That's when I saw it. Movement. Slow, deliberate. Not the startled flinch of a lost hiker. About 20, maybe 30 feet into the trees, half crouched, someone was rising. Another man, taller, dressed in a dark hoodie and jeans. His face was shadowed by the branches, but I could see enough. He wasn't scanning the area. He wasn't looking for anyone. He was looking at me. He began walking forward, not rushing, just steady, unhurried steps, like there was no need to chase what he already believed he had. My stomach turned cold. Every instinct in me screamed, "Move, run, now." But my legs betrayed me, locking in place for that half second too long. The man beside me shifted a step closer. His expression changed. Gone was the frantic husband, replaced by something colder. Expectant, like he was waiting for a signal. "I think she went that way," he said again, pointing toward the man in the trees. Pointing again, but I didn't even follow his hand this time. Instead, I took a single step back toward my car, then another, keeping my eyes locked on him. "You sure you can't call someone?" he asked. His tone had shifted, sharper now, with an edge that told me he knew I was lying about not having a phone. "I'll check," I mumbled, my voice so faint it barely left my throat. My legs kept moving me backward, slow but steady. I didn't dare turn around. I didn't want to lose sight of either of them. The man in the trees was closer now, his figure coming into sharper detail between the pines. His mouth hung slightly open, and there was nothing in his face, no curiosity, no confusion, just blank focus. On me. That was when instinct overrode everything. I spun and bolted for my car. I didn't glance back to see if they gave chase. I yanked the driver's side door open so hard it slammed into my hip, scrambled inside, and hit the lock before my body was even fully in the seat. My hands shook as I fumbled the keys into the ignition. The man by the SUV shouted something. I couldn't make out the words over the roar of my own heartbeat and the sudden cough of the engine catching. I floored it, tires spitting gravel as I lurched back onto the narrow road, swerving slightly before the tires gripped. For a few seconds, my rear-view mirror was empty. Then they appeared, side by side now, standing completely still watching me go. No chase, no surprise, just watching. I didn't let myself slow down for over an hour. My hands were welded to the steering wheel, knuckles aching from how tightly I gripped it. The winding road blurred past me, every curve and shadow sending a fresh jolt of fear that I'd see their SUV ahead, like they'd found some hidden shortcut and were waiting for me. But the road stayed empty. It wasn't until I reached a small rest stop, little more than a vending machine, a trash bin, and a faded wooden board with a map, that I finally pulled over. My legs wobbled when I stepped out. My phone flickered to a single weak bar of signal, and I called my friend in Denver. I tried to sound normal, but the moment she picked up, my voice cracked, and everything spilled out. I didn't call the cops right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to even tell them. Technically, nothing had happened. No one touched me, no one blocked my car, no one flashed a weapon. But that hadn't been some random roadside mishap. I knew what I saw. More importantly, I knew what I felt. Pure, deliberate intent. The next morning, I did report it to the local sheriff's office. The deputy didn't outright dismiss me, but I could hear it in his tone. He thought I was mistaken, maybe just spooked from being alone in the mountains. He asked if I'd gotten a license plate. I hadn't. He said they'd check the area, but it was probably nothing. I left feeling both frustrated and oddly relieved, because the truth, the part I didn't say out loud, was that if those men had really wanted to catch me, I think they could have. I think they were waiting for something, maybe just a few more seconds of hesitation, a few more steps between me and my car. It's been 3 years, and I still think about it every single time I pass a vehicle with hazard lights on. I still drive. I still take solo trips. But I never stop for anyone anymore. It sounds cold, I know, but I've made my peace with the choice. I'd rather live with guilt than not live at all. I don't know who they were, what they planned, or how many others they'd tried it on. Maybe nothing ever came of it. Maybe I was paranoid. But deep down, I know the truth. If I had taken just a few more steps toward that tree line, you wouldn't be reading this right now. My name's Matt King. I'm 32, a former Army medic, and up until that night, a part-time Uber driver just trying to keep the lights on. After the divorce and too many nights waking up choking on flashbacks, I'd left Oregon behind. My marriage, my career, my so-called stability, all of it gone. Grand Junction was supposed to be quiet. That's what I wanted. Silence. The kind you find on empty highways at 1 a.m. Window cracked, the dry cold cutting across my face, rubber humming against asphalt. No questions, no goodbyes, just miles. That night had been routine. My last passenger was a freshman from the community college. Earbuds in, head down. I dropped him at the dorms, wished him luck on finals, and watched him disappear inside before swinging my car toward the Circle K on East York. My spot. Always the same ritual. Park, pump gas, grab a Monster, nod at the cashier, and back on the road in 5 minutes flat. Predictable, Safe. Only, this time, wasn't. The first thing I saw was the door. Not propped open with a brick like usual. Not stuck on its hinges. Just hanging ajar, the wind nudging it like it couldn't decide whether to shut or welcome me in. At 11:10 p.m., that wasn't right. I stepped inside. The place felt wrong. Overhead lights buzzed and flickered near the drink aisle. The refrigerators hummed, steady and low, but the rest of the store was dead silent. No clerk behind the counter. No tinny pop station drifting from the radio. No half-hearted evening from the kid in the red vest. Just an empty register glowing in the dark like it was waiting for someone. Hello? My voice cracked on the word. Somebody here? Nothing. I moved cautiously down the aisle, the squeak of my sneakers louder than I wanted. The fridge nearest the snack rack was wide open, its alarm beeping in steady protest. A blue Gatorade lay on the floor, bottle rolling slightly in the cold draft. By the mop station, the bucket was overturned, a dirty pool of water spreading across the tiles. And strangest of all, thin drag marks streaked through the puddle. Lines in the slush and dirt that snaked toward the back hallway. Every hair on my neck stood on end. I swallowed hard. Clerk? You okay back there? No reply. Just my breath fogging and the chill seeping through the broken front seal. Every rational part of me screamed to walk out, call it in, and let somebody else deal with it. But my boots carried me forward anyway. The hallway was dim, one overhead bulb pulsing like it couldn't decide to live or die. 2 doors, employee only and restrooms, both shut tight. The employee door's handle was streaked with something dark. Not much, just enough to make my stomach knot. I rapped lightly on the restroom door. Hey, you good in there? My voice dropped to a whisper without meaning to. For a beat, silence. Then, faint movement. A shuffle. I froze. And that's when he appeared. He stepped out of the shadows like he'd been there the whole time. Tall. Hood pulled low, gray sweatshirt damp, jeans darkened at the cuffs like he'd trudged through half-melted snow. He didn't say a word. Didn't even blink. His face wasn't scared, wasn't hostile. It was empty. A hollow expression like whatever was supposed to be behind his eyes had already checked out. You work here? I asked, my body already edging back toward the front. No answer. He passed me slowly, like I was furniture he didn't need to notice. Calm, casual, like a man leaving a dentist appointment, not a scene like this. He pushed through the side emergency exit, cold night air spilling in around him, and disappeared into the snow. I just stood there, heart pounding in my throat, half torn between chasing after him and vomiting on the tiles. My hands shook as I fumbled my phone from my pocket. 911. What's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice steadied me just enough. I forced the words out, every detail I could remember, even as my gut told me I'd just walked through something I wasn't supposed to see. The open door, the empty aisles, the man in the hoodie disappearing into the snow. That's what I told the dispatcher when she asked if I could safely check on anyone inside. My gut twisted and I said, no, not a chance. She kept her tone even, said help was already on the way, 15 minutes tops. So I waited. I leaned against the coffee machines, eyes locked on that dark hallway like it might spit the man back out at me. The fridge alarm kept beeping in the background, steady, shrill, unrelenting. Funny how that's the thing burned into me now. Not the silence, not even the man's face. Just that endless alarm like a heart monitor, like something warning me the pulse of the place was dying. The police didn't take 15 minutes, they were there in 7. Lights flashing blue and red against the snow outside, the kind of sight that makes your chest clench even if you haven't done a damn thing wrong. 2 officers came in, both tense, one with his hand resting near his holster. You the caller? The taller one asked. Yeah, I said, raising my hand slightly without even thinking. Matthew King, I just stopped for a drink. They didn't waste time. One swept the aisles, the other went straight toward the back. I didn't move from my spot, didn't want to. A moment later, I heard the shout, sharp, urgent, and then the heavy crack of the restroom door being forced open. I didn't go look. I couldn't. Not until later, when they wheeled a stretcher out. The body bag was unzipped halfway, and I caught a glimpse of brown hair, a pale face, and the bright red of a Circle K polo. His name tag caught the light. Jesse, early 20s, just a kid, really. The paramedic shook his head once as they passed. They told me he was alive when they found him, but he bled out at the hospital an hour later. The rest of the night blurred. Statements, questions, the same words spilling out of me over and over. First to the uniforms, then to detectives, then to a tired woman in a blazer from Circle K corporate who smelled faintly of cigarettes. Did I know the man in the hoodie? No. Had I seen his face clearly? Sort of, but not enough. He looked average. That was the worst part. No scars. No features to cling to. Just a face you'd forget a second after passing it in a crowd. They pulled the security footage the next day. Nothing. Clean slate. The system had been wiped from 10:42 to 11:03, exactly the window that mattered. The last clip showed Jesse smiling, handing a pack of cigarettes across the counter. No hint of trouble, no tension in his face. Then static. The working theory was simple, too simple. Maybe Jesse caught him stealing. Maybe he tried to stop him. Maybe he never even saw the knife before it was too late. Whatever happened, it ended behind that restroom door, blood pooling under the crack while the rest of the store sat frozen in silence. They never caught him. The story floated around for a while, whispered in break rooms, and mentioned in local news blurbs. Then it faded, like these things always do. But not for me. I quit driving nights. I quit stopping at gas stations altogether. If a fridge beeped in a grocery store, I'd flinch hard enough for people to stare. Sometimes I saw Jesse's face in crowds, his red shirt flashing like a ghost at the corner of my vision. Sometimes I dreamed I was back in that hallway. Except this time the man in the hoodie didn't walk past me. This time he turned. They held a small memorial for Jesse at that Circle K corporate, sent flowers. Employees wore black ribbons over their vests. I didn't go. God, I wanted to. But I couldn't. It felt wrong. I didn't know him. I hadn't saved him. I was just the guy who showed up too late. Weeks later, a card arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name in faint pencil across the front. Inside, a short note. You did the right thing. He would have hurt more people if you hadn't called. Jesse was my friend, thank you. No signature. I stared at that card for a long time. Maybe it was his family, maybe a coworker, maybe just some stranger who wanted to ease my conscience. I don't know. It didn't help me sleep. Not right away. But something shifted. Slowly, I started driving again. Only in daylight. I found a therapist. I started volunteering at the vet center with other guys who carried their own ghosts. They say healing isn't straight. It's loops, detours, dead ends. They're right. I'm not fixed. But I'm still here. And sometimes being in the wrong place at the wrong time means you're the only one left to do the right thing. It doesn't make you a hero. It doesn't erase the pain. But it means the story doesn't disappear into static. Someone lives to tell it. And sometimes, that's enough. They say you never notice the rhythm of your life until something snaps it in half. For me, that snap came on a Thursday night in April, 5 minutes before midnight. But you have to know the rhythm first to understand how jarring it felt when it broke. My nights were predictable. The hum of the soda fridge filling the silence. The faint buzz of tired fluorescent lights overhead. The tacky feel of the lottery machine keys sticking under my fingertips. I'd been working closing shifts at the Circle K on Mallard Creek for nearly a year. Not glamorous, not miserable, just enough to keep my gas tank full, groceries in the fridge, and tuition partly paid at UNC Charlotte. I was a junior in digital media, nothing flashy, nothing crazy. Work, school, repeat. I didn't mind nights. In fact, I preferred them. No managers hovering behind me, no never-ending lines, no impatient yelling about scratch-offs or cartons of Marlboros. Most shifts I mopped, stocked, and listened to podcasts with one earbud in. Mostly movies, sometimes true crime. Ironic, given how that night unfolded. That Thursday was quiet. I served 3 people in the last hour before close. A nurse buying Red Bulls looking like she hadn't slept in days. A guy in a tracksuit who kept his hood up, eyes down, like he wanted to disappear. Routine stuff. By 11:45, I was locking the beer cooler, counting the till, rolling quarters, and running the Z report. The store was silent except for the occasional thud of the ice machine and the soft ding of the bathroom door when someone slipped in. Then he walked in. At first glance, he looked ordinary. Mid-40s, maybe my dad's age. Jeans, a gray hoodie, sneakers worn thin at the heels. He shuffled down the aisle, grabbed a Mountain Dew, circled back for pork rinds. Nothing unusual. But the way he lingered, the way his eyes flicked up too often, it didn't feel like browsing. It felt like stalling. He placed his items on the counter, stared at me a beat too long before speaking. "What time you off?" I forced my voice steady as I rang him up. "Midnight." He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. His teeth were yellow, uneven, like broken piano keys jammed into his gums. "I'll wait outside," he said. "We can talk." I let out a quick, awkward laugh, trying to make it sound like a joke. Yeah, not really much of a talker, man. He just nodded, slow, deliberate, as though he'd expected that response all along. He dug into his pocket, counted out exact change, slid it across the counter and walked out. Except he didn't leave. On the monitor above the register, I watched him lean against the brick wall just beyond the reach of the front camera. He crossed his arms, didn't light a cigarette, didn't scroll his phone, didn't pace. Just stood there, watching. My eyes darted to the clock, 11:58. In 2 minutes, the alarm would auto-arm and lock the doors. But that only worked if I was already outside, which meant if I hesitated, I was stuck in here with him waiting on the other side. My chest tightened, my pulse thumped in my throat. This wasn't in the training manual. I started busying myself with meaningless tasks, wiping counters that were already clean, checking the cooler doors twice, straightening coffee cups. Anything to buy time. My fingers fumbled at my phone. I shot a text to Marcus, my roommate. "Dude, weird guy outside. Might need a ride." Read. No reply. I peeked through the blinds near the red box. He hadn't moved. Same spot. Same stare. I couldn't see if he was smiling anymore, but I could feel it. At 12:06, I gave up and called Tanya, my manager. She answered quick. "What's up, Jay?" "Hey, there's this guy outside. Came in right before close, kinda weird. Said he's waiting for me. He's just standing out there." "Is he threatening you?" Not directly. Just doesn't feel right. I don't want to walk out there." There was a pause. Then her voice sharpened. "Stay inside, I'm calling CMPD. Keep the doors locked. Don't talk to him. Don't do anything. Just wait." "Okay." My voice cracked. "You okay, Jay?" "I think so, I swallowed. "Just don't want to be a news headline, you know?" She didn't laugh. Tanya always put on a tough exterior, ex-military, night shifts since her own college days. But I heard the concern break through her tone. "Hang tight, I've got you." I hung up, checked the monitor again. He was still there, still motionless, still watching. It's hard to explain what fear feels like when it's silent. No scream, no crash, no sudden jump scare. Just that suffocating pressure, like being underwater too long, lungs burning but not knowing when you'll come up for air. At 12:17, red and blue lights washed across the parking lot. 2 squad cars glided in, calm, steady, like this was nothing new to them. One officer went straight toward the man. The other approached the glass doors, raised a hand and gestured for me to unlock them. I fumbled with the keys, my hands trembling so hard I almost dropped them, then turned the lock and let him in. My whole body shook. "You're Jaden?" "Yeah." My voice cracked more than I wanted. "You okay?" the officer asked. I nodded, though my throat felt too tight to speak. I didn't leave because, I don't know, he was just off. Kept staring, said he'd wait for me. The officer pressed a button on his shoulder radio and murmured something I couldn't catch. Static crackled back, then silence. I turned toward the window again. My stomach dropped. The man was gone. I blinked hard, like maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. Wait, where'd he go? The officer outside swept his flashlight in a slow, deliberate circle, across the bushes, the edge of the parking lot, down toward the road. The beam caught nothing but pavement and shadows. He was just here, I said, my voice rising. I swear, he was leaning right there. The officer inside glanced toward the glass, then back at me. His expression stayed calm, but there was a weight in his tone when he said, "They told me he matches the description of someone we've been watching for. Harassed a clerk on the east side last week. Same setup, waited outside after closing. Never laid a hand on anyone but scared the hell out of them." My mouth went dry. Do you think he was going to do something?" The officer shrugged, a tired kind of gesture, like he'd carried this answer too many times. "Can't say for sure, maybe he just likes the fear. Either way, you did the right thing. That night I didn't sleep. Marcus asked if I wanted to grab food when I got home, but I just shook my head and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as if its blades held answers. I kept hearing the man's words in my head. "I'll wait outside. We can talk." The way he said it, neither friendly nor threatening, just certain. Like it wasn't a question at all. Like it was inevitable. The next morning I asked Tanya for a shift change. She approved it instantly, no questions asked. By the following week I was working mornings. I told myself it wasn't because I was scared, just easier for my schedule. That was the lie I clung to. The truth was, I couldn't risk seeing him again. But fear has a way of bleeding into daylight. Walking to class, sitting in Starbucks, crossing a crowded quad, I'd catch a glimpse of a man with the same slow walk, the same build, always just out of focus, always gone when I blinked. Once, in a Harris Teeter parking lot, some guy asked if I had jumper cables. I jumped so hard I dropped my keys. He looked startled, even apologized. I laughed it off, embarrassed, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. People think fear is loud. Sirens, breaking glass, screams in the night. Sometimes it's a whisper, a shape in your peripheral vision, a sound that doesn't belong. A man leaning against a wall, smiling with his teeth but not his eyes. I didn't tell my mom. She worries enough. I just said I was changing shifts because of classes. She believed me. Honestly, I wanted to believe me too. Months later, I ran into Tanya at a coffee shop near campus. She was off duty, dressed in jeans and a hoodie instead of the Circle K polo. She smirked when she saw me. "You look less like a vampire." "Morning shifts will do that," I said. We joked a little, then her expression shifted. "You ever hear anything else about that guy?" I shook my head. "No, but I think about it more than I should." Her eyes softened. "Yeah, me too. I've been in retail 10 years, closed thousands of nights. You just never know which night it's going to be." That stuck with me. Later that evening, I was walking home alone from the bus stop. The sky was dimming, shadows stretching long across the street. For a second, the air shifted, the same crawling feeling I'd had that night, like eyes pressing into my back. I froze, turned. No one was there. I let out a laugh, but it rang hollow in the empty street. The truth is, some part of me still expects to see him again. Not because I believe in ghosts or fate, but because men like him don't just vanish. They linger, in parking lots, in the edges of dreams, always just out of frame. It's been over a year now. I graduated, moved to Raleigh, started a job in UX design. I haven't seen him again, but that night follows me still. It's in the way I double-check every lock, the way my eyes scan crowds automatically, the way I never ignore that small gnawing voice in my gut. That's the thing no one tells you. Fear doesn't just disappear, it evolves. I'm not 19 anymore counting bills behind bulletproof glass at Circle K, but I carry that night with me. And if you asked me what I learned, I'd tell you this. Survival isn't always about strength. Sometimes it's about listening to your instincts, to your unease, to the quiet voice whispering, something's wrong. I don't know what that man wanted. I don't know what he was waiting for, but I know I didn't give it to him. And maybe in some small way that's enough. Always trust your gut. Fear isn't weakness, it's survival. The moment something feels wrong, act, stay put, call someone, walk away. Because danger rarely announces itself. Sometimes it looks ordinary, sometimes it smiles, sometimes it leans against a wall and says, "I'll wait outside." They say your first job shapes you, teaches you responsibility, a little independence, maybe even pride. Mine didn't. Mine taught me how close evil can live beside the ordinary, how it can disguise itself behind a name tag and a tired smile. I was 19, barely a week out of high school, when I started the overnight shift at the Circle K on Long Ridge Road in Huntsville. The hours weren't kind, but I didn't complain. I needed money for college that fall, and the quiet nights gave me space to think. It was usually just me and one other clerk until sunrise. His name was Jim. Jim was in his 50s, rail thin, gray creeping around his temples, his eyelids always heavy as if sleep never really left him. He kept to himself mostly, surviving on cold coffee poured from a scratched plastic thermos. Some nights the silence between us stretched hours long, no more than a muttered, "Hey," when I clocked in, maybe a later when I left. But on the night of July 5th, he broke the silence in a way that stuck with me. "Tile's acting up again," he said as I punched in my code. His voice was low, almost distracted. "Might hear banging, don't worry about it. Plumbing's been bad all week." I froze, my finger still on the clock-in button. "Banging?" I repeated. "Yeah." He sipped his coffee slowly, his eyes on me. "Old pipes. They sound worse than they are. Don't open it. Just ignore it." I gave a short laugh, the kind that's supposed to sound casual but doesn't. "Right. Got it." But something about him unsettled me. Not what he said, but how he said it. Too flat, too rehearsed, like he'd practiced the line in his head. Still, I was the new kid and he wasn't. He'd worked here for years. I figured he'd seen every kind of weird night. Leaks, rodents, raccoons rummaging through the dumpster. So I brushed it off, shelved the chip aisle, stocked the cooler, and fell into the rhythm of a quiet shift. That's when I heard it. Thump, thump, thump. It came from the back hallway, the one with the single-stall restroom. At first I told myself it was a vent, maybe a mop closet door swinging on loose hinges. Then it came again. Thump, thump. This time slower, hollow, rhythmic, like someone knocking from the wrong side of a wall. My chest tightened. I glanced at Jim. Nothing. He didn't even look up, didn't twitch, didn't frown. Just sat there behind the counter, eyes low, sipping, as if the noise didn't exist. "Hey, I forced my voice to sound casual, but it cracked anyway. "You hear that?" Jim didn't turn. He didn't blink. Just swallowed another mouthful of lukewarm coffee. "I told you," he said. His voice was firm now, not casual, final. "Old plumbing. Ignore it." A weight settled in my chest. Something about the way he said, "ignore it," made my skin crawl. I nodded anyway, pretended to accept it. But deep down I knew. He was lying. I tried to keep moving, to make myself busy. Wiping counters that weren't dirty, rearranging candy bars already straight. But the noise didn't stop. Thump. Thump. Always spaced out, always just long enough to make me question if I imagined it. By midnight, I gave up pretending. My hands were trembling when I pulled out my phone and texted my best friend Maddie. "This job's creeping me out tonight." Her reply came instantly. "Girl, quit. Retail isn't worth demons in the bathroom." I smirked, but it felt hollow. I wanted to laugh, wanted to dismiss it like she did, but my body knew better. Something was wrong. Jim still hadn't moved. Not once. He hadn't spoken again. He hadn't even poured himself another cup of coffee. He just sat there, flipping through a beat-up spiral notebook filled with receipts and pen scratches, like a man pretending to be busy. The thermos sat empty beside him, untouched. His silence was heavier than the sound from the hallway. At 12:58, he suddenly stood. The chair legs scraped against the tile, sharp enough to make me flinch. "I'm taking my break," he muttered. His eyes didn't meet mine. "Back in 20. And then he walked out. No jacket, no keys. Just left. Out into the night, like he had somewhere important to be, leaving me alone with the sound still coming from the back. I waited 5 minutes. Then 10. The store was dead quiet except for the humming of the coolers, and every second stretched too long. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I walked toward the back, each step echoing down that narrow hallway. The light above the restroom flickered, buzzing faintly, and it made my stomach twist like something was warning me to turn back. I stopped in front of the door, my hand hovering over the handle. My fingers shook so badly I couldn't bring myself to touch it. Instead, I crouched, pressed my ear to the wood. At first, there was nothing, just the hum of my own pulse in my head. Then I heard it, breathing, low, shaky, human, not pipes, not plumbing, breathing. And then, God. I heard a muffled sob, choked, desperate, the kind of sound that doesn't leave your chest once you hear it. I stumbled backward so fast I nearly tripped, my throat tight and raw. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone, fumbling with the screen like my fingers didn't know how to work anymore. When the operator picked up, my voice came out cracked but certain. "There's someone in the restroom," I said. "Please, I think someone's trapped. Please hurry." The cops were there in under 10 minutes. Red and blue lights painted the parking lot like a warning flare. One officer stayed with me outside while the other headed down the hallway, his hand resting on his holster. He didn't even bother to knock first. He tried the handle, locked. "This is the Huntsville Police Department." His voice was sharp, commanding. "Is anyone in there?" For a heartbeat, silence. Then a sound, weak. A sob. Then words cracked and breaking apart. "Please," a girl's voice said. "Help me." The officer didn't hesitate. One hard kick, and the door splintered inward. The next few minutes blurred together in my memory. Lights, radios blaring, more cars rolling up, paramedics rushing in with blankets. I stood frozen near the counter, a ghost in my own body, staring down that hallway as if the door itself had swallowed me whole. And then I saw her. They carried her out barefoot, duct tape still clinging to her wrists, streaks of blood across her arms where she'd clawed at the restraints. She couldn't have been more than 15. Blonde hair matted, pale skin, eyes swollen and red from hours of crying. She looked too fragile for the world she'd just been dragged out of. One of the officers came over to me, voice low but steady, asking me to walk him through everything. And I did. I told them about Jim, about the thumps, about his warning, about the way he just left like it was part of the plan. "Do you know where he went?" the officer asked. All I could say was no. His car was gone. His locker cleaned out. The break room dark. He'd vanished like he'd never been there at all. They kept me at the station until sunrise. Not because they thought I had anything to do with it, but because I was the only one who could connect the dots. I remember sitting there, drained, staring at my own hands as I asked them, what would have happened if I didn't listen to that sound? No one answered me. Later, I learned her name was Emily. She'd been missing for almost 2 days, snatched from a parking lot 2 towns over. The only reason she was still alive, they told me, was because I made that call. Jim never came back. They found his car days later in Pulaski, parked outside an abandoned hardware store. Inside, a burner phone, zip ties, receipts for fast food, a motel key. But no Jim. Interviews with his old co-workers, his neighbors, even people who barely knew him all turned up the same refrain. Quiet guy, a little odd, but nothing dangerous. Turns out no one really knew who he was at all. I quit 2 weeks later. I couldn't set foot inside that Circle K again. Not with the memory of that door, that sound, that notebook of his sitting in my head like a stone. Nights became the hardest. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. Thump. Thump. It's been 3 years now. I live in Birmingham. I started college later than I planned, but I made it. I don't work gas stations anymore. Hell, I barely stop at them unless I absolutely have to. Sometimes I still wake up hearing that sound. Sometimes I check the back doors of every building I walk into, making sure no one's hiding in the dark. Trauma is strange. It sharpens you, makes you alert, makes you see danger in the places where others don't. But it also leaves you afraid of silence because you know silence can hold things you never want to hear. People ask me what it felt like, finding her, being the one to call. I always say this. It felt like being in the exact right place at the exact right time, but also like it could have gone the other way. What if I hadn't put my ear to the door? What if I'd trusted Jim? What if she'd been left another night in there? I think about that often, and I think about how ordinary people can stumble into extraordinary moments without even realizing it. If I've learned anything, it's this. Trust your instincts, especially when something feels wrong. Don't let the fear of being mistaken keep you from acting, because sometimes the only thing standing between a victim and their rescue is one small, trembling moment of courage. I've never been the type to spook easily. I was the girl cracking jokes during horror movies while everyone else clutched throw pillows, shrieking when something jumped out of the shadows. I grew up in Mercer Falls, the kind of small town where people still left their front doors unlocked and trusted their neighbors to look out for them. Safety there was less about locks and alarms and more about belief. But safety is just that, a belief, not a guarantee. I learned that on a night I can still replay in perfect detail. It was March 12th, a Saturday. My friends and I had spent the evening at Kelsey's, the 6 of us huddled together in her basement, surrounded by blankets, half-empty soda cans, and the smell of pizza rolls that had been left a little too long in the oven. We were watching those old grainy horror movies from the 90s, the ones where the final girl always tripped while running through the woods and somehow managed to outrun a killer who never even broke a jog. We screamed when the fake blood sprayed across the screen, then collapsed into laughter seconds later. By the time I finally left, it was nearly 1:30 a.m., my eyes gritty from exhaustion and sugar. I took the back roads home. The highway near the industrial zone was still tied up with night construction, and I didn't want to deal with the flashing detour lights and crawling traffic. The back way was darker, yes, but quicker. Out there, the trees pressed in close on both sides, thick branches blotting out the sky, leaving only my headlights cutting 2 narrow tunnels through the black. Deer eyes flashed here and there from the roadside, eerie as coins in the dark. That's when the low fuel light blinked on. Seriously? I muttered, tapping the gauge as if that would change anything. I pulled out my phone. No bars. Perfect. I racked my memory. I'd passed a Circle K about 15 minutes back, glowing like a beacon on the edge of Bramble Creek Road. I sighed. I hadn't planned on stopping. I was still in pajama pants under my hoodie and coat, makeup smudged from the long night, hair sticking to my neck. I just wanted to collapse into bed. But gas tanks don't care about intentions. So I turned around, heading back toward the station. The Circle K sat there alone, buzzing under harsh fluorescent lights. The lot was empty except for a battered old pickup parked off to the side. Near the dumpsters, a man leaned against the wall, a cigarette glowing faintly in the brim-shadowed hollow of his face. His stillness bothered me, like he wasn't waiting, just existing there. I pulled up to pump 4. The overhead light flickered, buzzing like a wasp trapped in glass. Sliding my card into the reader, I waited. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. I cursed under my breath and glanced toward the store. The inside was lit, shelves glowing under bright aisles, but the counter looked deserted. My stomach tightened. I glanced back toward the dumpsters. The man was still there, smoke curling, head turned just slightly, but not enough to call it watching. I grabbed my keys and made for the door. Inside, the air was sharp with cleaning chemicals, citrus overlaid on the staleness of nachos that had sat under heat lamps too long. The hum of a flickering ceiling light echoed in the emptiness, making the space feel like a church stripped of warmth. The cashier sat behind the counter, lanky, early 20s maybe, with sunken eyes locked on a cracked phone screen. He didn't look up, didn't say a word, just slouched there, thumb twitching across the glass. I gave a polite nod, the kind you give out of habit, and headed toward the coolers. I grabbed a bottle of water, telling myself I'd pay cash, maybe grab some candy while I was at it, sugar as armor. But when I turned back toward the aisles, I froze. The man from outside had stepped through the sliding doors, a trail of cigarette smoke following him like a shadow. His boots left faint crunches on the salt scattered across the tile. He scanned the room quickly, like he wasn't there to buy anything, just to confirm something, and then his eyes found mine. They didn't move after that. I told myself I was imagining it. Gas stations at this hour always drew the odd stragglers, truckers, drifters, people with nowhere else to be. But when I turned down the candy aisle, he turned too. He didn't look at the shelves, didn't reach for a single thing, just walked behind me with his hands buried deep in the pockets of a stained green parka, his eyes studying me with a kind of focus that felt rehearsed. "Out kinda late for a girl," he muttered, voice low, deliberate, as if he already knew what answer he wanted. I forced myself not to flinch. My lips curled into a quick, polite smile, just enough to smooth the edges to keep whatever this was from sharpening. "Yeah," I said lightly, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. "Just getting gas, then heading home." I picked up my pace, walking straight to the register like I hadn't even heard him. The cashier finally tore his eyes from his phone when I dropped the water bottle on the counter, the plastic thunk echoing in the too empty store. My hands shook as I dug out a few crumpled bills, but I didn't bother with change or a receipt. I kept glancing toward the doors, watching the man's reflection in the glass as he trailed behind, slower this time, like he wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere. Outside, the cold bit at my skin. I slid my card into the pump again. This time it chirped and approved, no issue. Figures. My shoulders loosened, just for a second, until I heard the footsteps behind me. "My truck died," he said, gravel dragging in his voice. "Need a ride down to Birchwood?" I turned halfway, the pump nozzle clenched in my hand, trying to keep the steel and rubber barrier between us. He was closer than I thought, just outside arm's reach, close enough that I could smell the stale smoke clinging to his jacket. "I'm sorry," I said carefully, keeping my tone polite, practiced. "I'm actually late meeting someone. They're waiting on me." He stared at me, too long, the kind of stare that peeled at the edges of your words to test their truth. His lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You sure?" he asked. He shifted one step closer. "It's just 15 minutes. My grip tightened on the nozzle. "I really can't." He didn't move back. His hand stayed buried deep in his jacket pocket, and for a heartbeat I couldn't tell if he was gripping a phone or something colder. The night air thickened, pressing down on me. My pulse jolted. I yanked the nozzle free, shoved it back into the holder, and slipped into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut. Locks down. I twisted the key. Click. Nothing. My stomach sank. Tried again. Silence. The world went narrow and ringing, the sound of my breath too loud in the sealed car. He stepped closer, the shadow of his parka filling my side window. His voice was steady, almost bored. "You're making a mistake, girl." Then his open palm smacked the glass, hard. Once. The sound was a crack, a promise. Not a plea, not a joke. My body froze, muscles wired with terror. And then, years later, the memory of that sound tangled with the discoveries they made after. Scratches, dozens carved into concrete walls, fingernails wedged into cement like desperate signatures, names scribbled on the back of a dusty photograph. Kay, Mira, Tessa, none of them Maisie. The police ran prints. The name Greg Hartwell was fake. His rental was paid in cash. No valid license. No DMV trail. Just a shell of a person constructed with precision. In the spring thaw 2 months later, dogs led officers to the woods behind his duplex. 2 shallow graves beneath a pine. Small. Children. No identification. No families ever reported them missing. Only makeshift crosses of tree branches and tiny wooden animals carved by hand, lined at their feet like offerings. We didn't stay in Fairbanks after that. Maisie went silent for 3 weeks, her words locked away somewhere unreachable. I didn't sleep longer than a few minutes at a time. I packed us up and moved to the Pacific Northwest. New names, no traceable ties. I deleted every account, severed every old thread of connection. We live quiet now. And no one gets near my daughter without a background check and a waiting period. But shadows don't vanish with distance. Sometimes I catch his shape in a doorway when I walk home late. Sometimes I hear the same soft knock at the back door and freeze, too afraid to breathe. Maisie still has the rabbit. I tried to throw it away twice. Both times it returned to her bookshelf like it had never left. She doesn't talk much about that night except once. I asked if she remembered what he said on the stairs. She looked at me, her voice small, emptied out. He said I reminded him of his real daughter, the one who didn't come around. That's when I knew. He wasn't just a man. He was something else. A collector. Of silence. Of secrets. Of the forgotten things no one notices are gone until it's far too late. We are taught to be polite, to smile, to nod, to avoid offense. But kindness without boundaries is a weapon turned against you. Monsters shovel your driveway. They hold open doors. They mutter in quiet voices at gas stations. Survival means listening to the wrong feeling before it blooms into the right regret. Always trust your instincts, because sometimes the most dangerous door isn't the one you open. It's the one someone else has already locked from the inside. It was February 9th, 2023, 11:22 p.m. at the Circle K on East Ironwood Street in Flagstaff. I'd picked up the night shift to scrape together enough money for art school. Temporary, I kept telling myself. Just a stepping stone, not forever. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry insects. The mop bucket sat in its corner with stale water rocking inside, and in the rare moments between customers, I filled scraps of paper with quick sketches. Concertinas of characters, fight scenes, messy thumbnails of the worlds I wanted to build. I thought the night would be routine. Boring, even. I had no idea how wrong I was. The lights always made my head ache, but I told myself I could live with it. I leaned against the counter, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, its bitter taste clinging to my tongue, while flipping through a stack of rough drawings. Battle sequences, sharp expressions, shadow-drenched panels that made my chest race with the possibility of something bigger than this place. The store was still, hushed. Every aisle looked like a hallway leading nowhere. The clock on the wall ticked steady and loud in the quiet. 11:05. 4 customers so far. A pizza delivery guy who barely made eye contact, a jittery student hauling 2 cans of Monster, a road-weary traveler gathering chips and beef jerky. Each encounter short, Transactional. A nod, a total. Change in hand, gone. No conversation. At 11:21, everything shifted. It started with a sudden, vicious throb that felt like a hammer driving straight into the center of my skull. My knees buckled and the coffee sloshed, splattering brown arcs across the counter. I grabbed at my head, gasping, blinking, but the room seemed to sway sideways. The black and white tiles beneath me warped into something fluid, melting into each other. My pen clattered from the counter and rolled away, a sound that seemed impossibly loud. I reached back blindly, searching for something, anything to ground me, my hand finding the mop bucket. I thought plunging my face into the cold water might help, might snap me out of it. But my body betrayed me. My legs crumpled, folding underneath like collapsing shutters. I staggered, desperate, and lurched toward the stockroom, needing to get out of sight before someone walked in and found me like this. I shoved past the swinging door and collapsed hard onto a stack of crates. The impact jarred my shoulder with a hollow crunch that reverberated through my bones. I curled up instinctively, knees to chest, trying to ride out the wave. If I stayed small enough, maybe the pain would loosen its grip. Maybe the world would stitch itself back into something steady. But minutes stretched into something shapeless. My breath came ragged, shallow. Sweat coated me in a clammy sheen, dripping down my temples and stinging my eyes. Sometimes I felt hot, like my skin was burning, and then cold, like I'd been dropped into ice. My thoughts slid in and out of reach. Dehydration, stress, migraine. I tried to think of reasons, explanations that didn't end with something's really wrong. But each time I pushed up on my elbows, my arms shook and failed. I collapsed again, pressing my forehead to my knees, shivering despite the stale warmth of the stockroom. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The vibration felt foreign, like it belonged to another world. I fumbled it out with trembling hands. A text from my brother. Still at work? His words blurred, seemed impossibly far away. I wanted to answer, but I couldn't even get my fingers to obey. That's when I heard it. A voice, faint, mechanical. Not human. Ground movement detected in stockroom, the automated alert intoned through the intercom. The sound bounced off the concrete walls, an eerie, flat echo. My heart kicked into a faster rhythm. I barely had time to register the words before I heard the hiss of the front door sliding open. Heavy footsteps rushed inside, faster, louder, closer, and then my manager burst through, eyes wide, like the store had just swallowed me whole. Her voice was sharp, high-pitched with panic, slicing through the haze as she rushed in and found me crumpled behind the stacks of boxes. I couldn't lift my head, but I felt her hands on me, frantic, pressing, shaking gently as if she could jolt me awake. Hey, are you okay? Stay with me. Oh God. The words were muffled, stretched thin, but the urgency pressed through. I caught the sound of her voice breaking as she shouted for someone, then the clipped, trembling rush as she called 911. I wanted to answer, to tell her I was fine, that it would pass, but my lips wouldn't move. The edges of my vision caved inward, black spots blooming and scattering until there was nothing left. When I opened my eyes again, the world was sterile, white, and humming. A ceiling I didn't recognize hovered above me. The sheets beneath me were stiff, the air filled with that unmistakable bite of antiseptic. My head throbbed violently, as if someone had split my skull with a jackhammer. A nurse appeared at my side, steady, practiced. She pressed a cup of water into my shaking hand. "You're lucky, sweetie," she said softly. My throat was so dry my voice barely escaped when I whispered back. The tears came before I knew they were there, stinging, unwanted. A clear IV line ran into my arm, cold fluid dripping slowly, keeping me tethered to something like life. Then the doctor entered, footsteps firm, face serious. Navy scrubs, tablet in hand, expression carefully composed. He didn't waste words. We had a scare. At first we suspected a stroke, then a bleed. He paused just long enough to let the weight of it settle, and I braced myself for something worse. But your scans show a brain aneurysm pressing against the optic nerve. Small, but unstable, just enough to rupture. His voice was steady, but my stomach hollowed. You were a hair's breadth from a catastrophic hemorrhage. I stared at the ceiling tiles, forcing words past the lump in my throat. Am I going to be okay? Yes, he said, and nodded once, calm but certain. But it's serious. We'll need more tests. Surgery may be necessary. I thought I was just dehydrated, I whispered. My voice cracked. He reached out, placed a warm hand over mine, grounding me. You thought right. But life was sending you warnings. This time you couldn't ignore them. Recovery blurred into long days, 2 spent in the ICU where the beeping monitors never stopped, followed by a quieter private room that felt less like survival and more like waiting. The hospital lights stabbed at my eyes, even coffee, once my crutch, smelled oddly sweet and foreign. My vision shimmered when I tried to read, and my legs shook when I stood to walk the hallway. Still, I kept my sketchbook with me. The pencil scratched slowly across paper, each line deliberate, shaky. Sketches of IV poles, outlines of masked nurses, blurred self-portraits with hollow eyes. Illustrating my own unraveling felt strange, like turning my body into a story I hadn't agreed to write. Visitors filtered in, my brother first, pale and tight-lipped, trying not to cry. Then classmates, co-workers, even my manager who had been the one to find me on the stockroom floor. Word spread quietly. Melanie nearly had a stroke. Their voices cracked when they told me how pale, how lifeless I had looked that night. I had to skip classes, lost shifts, filled days with scans and follow-up appointments. Still, I drew. I needed to capture it, to pin down the fragility before it slipped away. 2 weeks later, doctors scheduled the coiling procedure. The thought of it, the precision, the finality, felt surreal, like my life had veered into an irreversible plot twist I hadn't chosen. The fear didn't paralyze me, though. It pushed me forward. I had come too close to what if, and I refused to let my story end there, unfinished. The morning after surgery, nausea tore through me. Exhaustion weighed every limb. But when I woke fully, I noticed something new. The world seemed sharper, clearer. On my bedside table sat my sketchbook, open to an unfinished drawing of a phoenix rising in flame. Its wings stretched wide, bold, unbroken. Now I'm out of the hospital, back to life, though not the same one. I quit Circle K the day after discharge, closing that chapter with no hesitation. I've started selling art commissions online. Small steps, but growing. My brother helped set up a scholarship fund so I can finally return to art school. I balance part-time graphic design work, careful about my hours, cautious with my health. Water bottles are always within reach. Migraines still hum at the edges of my days, but I listen now. I pay attention. On my desk, next to my sketchbook, sits a crushed paper cup, the same one that slipped from my hand that night, stained with coffee, flattened and fragile. It's my reminder. That job gave me money, but nearly cost me everything else. That pain wasn't just stress. It was my body screaming in a language I refused to hear, until it dragged me down. Listen when your body speaks. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through headaches, tremors, or bone-deep fatigue. Pay attention, because sometimes your second chance depends on it. People always warned me about going back home. After 5 years of drifting between night shifts in small towns, I knew exactly what I was walking into when I returned to Lexington. I took a job as the manager at the Circle K on Meadowview Drive in November 2023, convincing myself it would be easy money, quiet, predictable, free of the kind of chaos I was done living with. I was exhausted, not just physically, but in the kind of way that seeps into your bones. I didn't want drama anymore. I didn't want reminders of the ghosts I'd carried from place to place, real or imagined. All I wanted was stillness. The first week was exactly that. Nights rolled by slow and steady. A few truckers passing through, one or two bleary-eyed regulars grabbing coffee and those shrink-wrapped breakfast sandwiches. I'd lean on the counter, sip from my thermos, and watch the cameras hum along. Nothing to complain about. Then Benji showed up. He was 22, bright-eyed, said he was starting classes at UK in January and wanted something to keep him busy at night. I remember how he smiled, how polite he was. One of those kids who still said yes, sir, even when you told him not to. He stocked shelves without being asked, swept floors that didn't need sweeping. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. A reliable night clerk? That's gold. For a few weeks, everything ran smooth. Then the inventory started to get off. Not missing exactly, but odd. Numbers matched sales. Categories broke down just fine, but something about the rhythm of it made me uneasy. I'd go over logs twice, 3 times, convinced I was just tired. Cameras showed nothing, no shoplifters, no mistakes. But the reports told me something wasn't right. Then one night, 2:17 a.m. sharp, I watched it happen. A woman came in wearing a puffy jacket. She had a candy bar in her hand. She dropped it, clattering onto the cold tile. Benji bent, picked it up, scanned it, handed it back. She didn't thank him. She just left. Simple, forgettable. The next night at 2:17 a.m., she came back. Same jacket, same brand of candy bar, dropped it again. Benji, same motion, same scan, same wordless exchange. By the third night, I wasn't just noticing, I was waiting. I sat in the office staring at the timestamp overlays, watching the presale logs tick upward, watching the door sensor feed, waiting for 2:17 to hit. And like clockwork, she walked in, dropped the candy bar, and walked out. It didn't stop. Night after night, for a week straight, the same routine. I staggered shifts, stayed up on nights I wasn't supposed to work just to see if it would break. It never did. This wasn't a glitch. This was a pattern. Like someone had pressed play on a loop I wasn't supposed to see. At first, Benji didn't notice. I tried to bring it up without sounding insane. "Funny how she keeps showing up," I said one morning, as casual as I could. "You clocked that, right?" He blinked at me, expression empty, like I'd just spoken another language. He didn't laugh, didn't acknowledge it, just went back to organizing cigarette cartons. I let it drop. I didn't want him thinking I was losing my mind. But after that, the shifts started to feel different. The air at night grew colder, like the cooler doors were propped open somewhere. The hum of the porch light outside seemed sharper, the scanner's beep louder, the ding of the entry bell almost rehearsed. And the customers, God, the customers. A man in a green hoodie would come in, buy a can of soda. A teenager would walk straight to the fridge, grab a Red Bull, never look at me, never say a word. The same people, the same motions, every night. It was mechanical, like a program repeating itself. Only every so often I'd notice something wrong. A snag when a lottery ticket jammed in the machine. A plastic bag falling to the floor at the exact same moment as the night before. It was déjà vu with a vice grip, tightening each shift until I felt like I was suffocating. 2 weeks later, I came in for the morning shift. The store was unlocked, lights on, but Benji was gone. His jacket was still hanging in the break room. His phone sat on the table, plugged into the charger, screen still lit from an unread message, and no trace of him anywhere. That wasn't like him. Benji wasn't the type to just disappear mid-shift. The sight of his phone left charging on the break room table made my stomach twist. I called him immediately. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. Same result. My hands shook as I scrolled through the emergency contact list in the system. His mom picked up on the third ring, groggy, confused. "Benji?" "No, honey, he left for work like normal," she said. Her voice sharpened when I told her he wasn't at the store. "What do you mean he's not there? Did something happen?" I had no answers. Just the icy certainty something was wrong. I called a couple co-workers. Nothing. No one had seen or heard from him. That's when I dialed 911. I told them a clerk vanished mid-shift, that he was missing, that something wasn't right. The dispatcher gave me the standard script. Wait 24 hours, maybe he walked off. But I couldn't shake the feeling. This wasn't a kid skipping out. This was something else. I went back into the office and pulled up everything I could. Logs, time-stamped footage, inventory records. I scrolled until my eyes blurred. That's when I found it. A receipt buried in the system. 5 years old. Same store address, same register number. December 3rd, 2018, 3:13 a.m. A gas sale, a pack of gum, a note with the address, Meadowview Drive. The date hit me like ice water. December 3rd, the exact same calendar day, 5 years earlier. I dug further. The clerk working that night had been a teenage boy. His name barely appeared in the records. No notes about why he stopped showing up. But a news clipping surfaced in the back of my mind. His mom and sister had died in a house fire that same night, just 6 blocks away. The boy disappeared after that. Never charged, never officially tied to anything. Just gone. Another tragedy, folded into the fog of small-town rumor. And now here I was, in the same building, on the same night. 5 years later, the threads knotted together in my chest until I could barely breathe. It wasn't coincidence. This store, this address, was a loop, a knot in time, spiraling in on itself, swallowing kids like Benji, like that boy, maybe like me. I told my district manager. She laughed. This isn't the Twilight Zone, it's retail. Midnight shifts screw with your head. Take a week off, I'll get a temp in. She thought I was burnt out. Maybe I was, but that didn't change what I'd seen. 2 nights later, I came back anyway. Shift started 11 p.m., ended 7 a.m. I arrived early, 10:45, heart pounding like I was walking into an execution. Everything was normal. Inventory balanced, cameras running, time cards synced. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it all. Then 3 a.m. came. The lights flickered, humming like a throat clearing before something spoke. I froze. At 3:13 a.m., it broke open. The scanner beeped by itself. The cash drawer popped. The door chimed. And the woman in the puffy jacket glided in. Same candy bar in her hand. Same stumble. Same cold silence. Behind the counter stood Benji, smiling that same cheerful nod like nothing had happened. My chest tightened. I lunged for the emergency light switch, flipping it hard. Nothing changed. The air stayed heavy, charged. Benji glanced at me just for a second, eyes flickering with something. Recognition? A plea? Then he turned back, scanned gum, nodding to no one. The pumps beeped. Beep, beep, steady, mechanical. I stumbled forward, yanked the cord from the register. The POS screen died. The drawer slammed shut. The woman froze. She didn't buy the candy. She stared at me instead. Her eyes glistened wet, wide, pleading or condemning. I couldn't tell. The fluorescent light caught the silver zipper of her coat gleaming like a blade. She whispered, low and broken. Again. My pulse hammered in my ears. The overhead fluorescence flickered until the whole store shuddered. The AC cut out with a cough. And then, she was gone. Benji too. Silence dropped. Heavy and absolute. The kind of silence that isn't empty but full, pressing against your ribs until you can't breathe. I didn't clock out. I couldn't. I just walked the aisles one last time, my footsteps echoing too loud against the cold tile. The register drawer sat open, waiting. At 3:59, I pushed through the glass doors and into the night. I left everything behind, keys, jacket, phone still buzzing in my pocket. I got in my car, turned the engine, and drove into the dark without headlights, as if hiding from the world itself. I didn't stop until sunrise lit the highway. I never went back. I changed towns, swore off night shifts for good. Even now, years later, I can't hear a register beep without my chest locking tight. Some nights I dream it. Same gum, same woman, Same store. I wake drenched in sweat, staring at the ceiling fan like it might flicker into that humming light. I don't pretend to understand what happened, whether it was a time loop, an echo, or just my mind snapping under fluorescent midnight hours. But I know this. When reality starts repeating itself, when patterns emerge too precise to ignore, pay attention, because not every loop lets you out. My name's Nathan Blair. I work as a travel photographer. Landscapes, quiet towns, forgotten little places tucked between cornfields and highways. I'm not someone who hunts for danger, not the type to pick fights with strangers in parking lots. I make a living pointing my lens at things that most people drive past without seeing. Grain silos leaning with age, crumbling theaters whose marquees still whisper the names of films no one remembers, and weather-beaten faces that look like they've been carved into the very soil of the Midwest. It was February 3rd, a Thursday, edging past midnight. I was somewhere between Minneapolis and Madison, my dad fresh out of heart surgery. The guilt of not being there sooner pressed down on me like another passenger, silent and heavy. The only company I had was Milo, my scrappy gray rescue cat who hated winter as much as I did, but endured it better, curled in the carrier on the seat beside me. We'd already slid twice on Highway 12, the car jerking sideways while the snow fell in ragged sheets like shredded paper caught in invisible currents. Road signs were plastered white, unreadable. My fingers ached from gripping the wheel. That's when I spotted the Circle K glowing ahead, its harsh fluorescent lights cutting through the storm like a lonely beacon. Relief pulled me toward it. I turned into the lot, heater rattling against the cold, Milo letting out a long, uneasy meow, like even he sensed the wrongness bleeding through the air. I told myself it was just the weather, just exhaustion. All I needed was caffeine, a bathroom, maybe a few minutes to stop shaking. But some nights don't care what you need. They've already decided what they'll teach you. The glass doors slid open with a mechanical chime, the sound swallowed instantly by the low drone of lights buzzing overhead. No music played, no hello from behind the counter. Just the hollow echo of my boots scraping salt-streaked tiles. Behind me, Milo yowled softly in protest, his cry fading as the door shut. At first, I assumed the cashier had stepped into the back. The counter sat unattended. A styrofoam cup of coffee half-drained but still warm. The soda fountain gave a broken hum, a sluggish line of red slush dripping steadily from its nozzle onto the grate below. That's when I noticed them. 2 men standing near the beer cooler. They weren't browsing. One leaned against the fogged glass door, hood pulled low, his face angled toward me for just a second before he looked sharply away. The other tilted in close, whispering too fast for me to make out more than a murmur. My pulse snagged when I caught 2 words as I passed. He's alone. I froze for half a heartbeat, trying not to show it. The second man's hand slipped into his coat, not toward a wallet, not for a drink, but for something hidden. His eyes caught mine briefly, a cold, flat calculation, then broke away. My chest thumped. Keep moving, I told myself. I walked quickly toward the back hallway where the restrooms were, forcing my steps to stay even, casual, as if I hadn't heard what I'd heard. Behind me, their voices carried again, sharper now, riding over the hum of the soda machine. Just wait by the side near the ice machine. I didn't breathe. Not really. My body moved without my permission, slipping into the restroom and easing the door shut. I didn't lock it. Locking it would have felt like a trap. Instead, I turned the faucet on, the splash of water covering the trembling of my hands, then stared into the mirror at my own pale reflection. My heart was running ahead of me, searching for answers. Above the sink, a small window waited, metal framed, old, no wider than 2 feet across. Just enough. My dad's voice rose in my head, the one lesson he'd drilled into me since I was a kid. If something doesn't feel right, it isn't. Trust your gut. Your gut is smarter than the smartest man you'll ever meet. I climbed onto the toilet, palms slick against the paint-chipped frame. The glass resisted at first, then groaned open on stiff hinges. A blast of bitter air slapped me hard in the face, the taste of snow rushing my lungs. Outside, the storm still howled, flakes whipping sideways in the wind, erasing the world into shifting gray. I hesitated only long enough to know there wasn't another choice. I hauled myself through the narrow frame, scraping my shoulder as I squeezed out, then dropped into the snow-packed alley behind the store. My boots sank deep, nearly to the ankles, and I stumbled forward, catching myself with raw palms against the icy pavement. The metal had bitten into my skin, but I didn't stop to feel it. I tucked my chin, lungs burning with frozen air, and pushed into a run along the back wall toward the lot. The cold didn't just sting, it punched through my jacket like 1,000 needles, filling my chest with fire every time I dragged in a breath. My exhales streamed out in frantic bursts of fog, little clouds tearing away behind me. When I reached the corner, I skidded to a halt. One of them was there. He stood behind the propane cage, no more than 5 steps from my car. The storm muffled everything, but I could hear my pulse hammering in my ears. He hadn't seen me yet. I dropped low, crouching hard into the snow, body trembling, heart so loud I half expected him to hear it through the wind. The man shifted, his shoulders tilting as he stepped out from the cage, eyes scanning the lot. For a second, he turned away. That was all I had. I bolted. Snow crunched under me as I sprinted across the open ground, boots sliding. My hand slammed against the door handle, yanking it open. I threw myself inside, Milo exploding from his carrier straight into my lap with a wild, panicked wail. I hit the locks with my elbow, breath ragged, chest tight, then movement. The second man burst from the shadows on my left, his figure cutting through the white chaos of the storm, sprinting full tilt toward the driver's side. His arm was raised, something dark gripped tight in his hand. I didn't think. I slammed the car into reverse. The tires spun wildly, throwing snow into a storm of its own before the car lurched back, fishtailing hard. My headlights cut across his face for just a fraction of a second. His expression wasn't one of bluff or intimidation, and whatever he held, it wasn't there to scare me. I shoved the gear shift forward, the engine roaring as the car bucked onto the road. I didn't look back, I just drove. By the time I made it to the next town, I was shaking so badly I could barely dial. I pulled into a crowded diner parking lot, parked under the glow of sodium lights, and called the sheriff's office. Inside the warm hum of voices and clatter of dishes, I gave my report over a cup of untouched coffee, one hand never leaving Milo's back. His body was warm, grounding me in a way my own body couldn't manage. The deputy who arrived was calm, professional, his notepad filling with quick strokes as he asked for details. Finally, he closed it with a soft snap and said, "You weren't the first, and I doubt you'll be the last." A week later, they called to confirm what I'd already guessed. The 2 men had been caught on camera in at least 2 other late-night robberies. Always the same pattern: quiet towns, snowstorms, forgotten back roads. But that night in Baraboo, they left with nothing. Too rushed, too sloppy. They hadn't expected anyone to notice the silence. I've never taken that route again. I avoid back roads in the snow now, even if it means running my gas tank down to fumes. My work slowed for a while. Whole weeks where I couldn't bring myself to raise my camera. A month passed before I took another photograph, but their voices still echo. I can still feel the way the air changed, that subtle shift when safety drains out of a place and danger steps in before you can see its face. Milo still meows every time I stop for gas, and every time I listen. People like to talk about bravery as if it's always dramatic, standing tall, charging forward, running into the fire. But the truth is quieter. Sometimes real bravery is the whisper in your gut that says, "Leave now." That night, I didn't prove anything. I didn't fight anyone. I didn't save a stranger's life or stop a crime. What I did was listen, and I made it home. That counts. Your instincts are louder than fear for a reason. You don't need evidence when your body already knows. Silence itself speaks, and if you're lucky, you'll hear it. because sometimes silence is the only warning you'll ever get. I never thought a part-time job at Circle K could drag me to the edge of something I couldn't explain, but it did. My name's Shelley Hart, and when I was 28, I took the overnight clerk job at the station on Vesper Hill Road in Roanoke, Virginia. My dad had just started chemotherapy, and I needed every cent I could scrape together to help with his co-pays. Nights seemed practical, no distractions, no stares, double pay, and silence I could fold myself into. Chris, my manager, was blunt the first night. "Shelley," he said, leaning against the counter with that half grin he had. "Things get weird around 3 a.m., you'll see. Just shake it off." I nodded, already imagining drunk teens or a raccoon rattling trash cans. Nothing I couldn't handle. That first week was mostly what I expected. Stocking shelves, ringing up Red Bulls, mopping bathrooms. The new camera system kept everything visible, every corner covered. Most nights I'd see a couple of late-night drivers, a local grabbing a soda, sometimes the same paramedic stopping by for coffee and small talk. The kind of shift where the hours just dissolve and you go home with mop water still on your shoes. But then 3 weeks in, it started. I was crouched in front of the soup cans, lining them neatly on the third shelf, when a full row toppled over. Not just a slip. Every can rolled onto the floor in a perfect arc, like a hand had brushed them. I froze, then turned toward the monitor behind me. Nothing. No customer, no glitch in the feed, just an empty store. I muttered to myself, "Damn shelves crooked," and forced my hands to stop shaking while I restacked them. A week later, it was worse. At 2:46 a.m., the door chime rang sharp and clear. My stomach dropped. I hurried to the counter, eyes fixed on the glass doors. But no one came in. No door swinging shut, no shadow slipping through. Just the dark parking lot glowing under a buzzing streetlight. I stood there, heart hammering, the radio droning out a looping weather report that felt almost taunting in the silence. My brain kept shoving logic at me. Faulty sensors, rodents, maybe wind pressure. But the rest of me didn't buy it. My body knew the difference. The air at that hour felt wrong, colder than it should, like someone had just walked past. Every shift ended quietly after that, but leaving felt like stepping out of a trap. I didn't tell Dad. He had enough to carry. I just smiled when he asked how work was and kept showing up. Then came the night that proved Chris's warning wasn't about drunks or rats. It was April 8th, 2022, my 7th week. I clocked in at 11. Aiming to coast through like always. Chips restocked, candy topped off, floors swept. Routine. Around 2:30 a.m., I checked my phone. Dad was asleep, meds taken. I shot my roommate a quick text. "Almost done." She pinged back. "Hang in there." I laughed under my breath, though it sounded forced, hollow in the quiet. At exactly 3 wangs, the lights flickered. Just a hiccup, but sharp enough to freeze me mid-step. A blast of cold air swept through, colder than any AC could make it. It crawled up my spine, needling between my shoulders. Then came the sound. 3 slow knocks. Not at the front door. Not anywhere a customer would be. The sound came from the storeroom. That door was steel, heavy, always locked. It shouldn't have been possible. I stopped in the middle of the aisle, staring at the faint glow of the flickering pantry light above it. My pulse thudded in my throat, and every instinct begged me not to move. But I made myself walk anyway, each step too loud, echoing through the aisles like someone was following. I reached the door. My hand shook as I touched the handle. It turned easily, unlocked. The hinges groaned when I pushed it open. I flicked the switch. Harsh fluorescent light filled the tiny room. Just the same dusty shelves, mop buckets, boxes of coffee packs. No footprints, no rats, nothing broken. But then I saw it. On the floor, near the corner. A Polaroid. Edges curled, colors almost bled away. I picked it up with both hands, afraid my fingers might smear it. The picture showed a boy in a Circle K uniform, smiling awkwardly, clutching a balloon. I flipped it over. On the back, in looping cursive, April 9th, 1994, his shift never ended. The words made my chest seize. A story I didn't know but suddenly understood spread in my head like wildfire. Some kid, alone at night, never making it home. The cans, the phantom chime, the knocks. The store didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like it was breathing, like it was waiting. I tucked the photo into my jacket pocket and stepped out of the storeroom. The door swung shut behind me with a heavy metallic click that seemed to echo through my ribs. I tried to shake it off, tried to return to routine, but my pulse was still thrumming like I'd run a mile. I stayed until dawn, acting like nothing had happened, but the Polaroid burned hot against my chest like a secret I couldn't carry. Chris rolled into the lot just after 6, radio blaring, steaming cup of coffee in hand. He pushed through the doors with his usual lazy stride. "How was the night?" he asked, tone casual. I forced a smile that felt stiff on my face. "Quiet." That was all I could give him. I went back to mopping the floor, ringing up the first wave of early commuters and stocking shelves like everything was normal. But I kept feeling it. The weight of eyes that weren't there, watching from every corner of the store. When Chris wandered toward the storeroom, I slipped the photo into the back office drawer and shut it gently. I couldn't bring myself to ask about it. If I opened my mouth, I was sure I'd sound unhinged. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, hearing every squeak of the cooler door replay in my head, every hum of the fluorescent lights, every echo of silence from that storeroom. At 1 in the morning, I sat up on my couch, grabbed my laptop and typed, Circle K 1994, Roanoke boy. The results made my blood run cold. A grainy local news clip popped up. 22-year-old Ethan Schultz went missing April 9th, 1994. Last seen alive leaving a Circle K on Vesper Hill Road. No trace ever found. The date matched, the store matched. And the boy's face, Ethan's face, was the one smiling up at me in that Polaroid. My breath came ragged. "Oh God," I whispered into the empty room. His shift really never ended. I slammed the laptop shut and shoved it under the couch cushion. But the truth sat heavy on my chest. That Polaroid hadn't been an accident. The next night I showed up anyway, running on caffeine and nerves. My uniform was neat, my shoes polished, but my stomach was knotted. Every beep of the register, every squeak of the cooler door, felt sharper than usual. I kept the radio turned up to some obnoxious talk station just to drown out the quiet. But when the hosts paused, the silence seemed to breathe around me. At 2:59, the lights dimmed. A cold draft slithered past my ankles. At 3 sharp, the storeroom door gave 3 slow, patient knocks. This time I didn't walk toward it empty-handed. I pulled out my phone, switched on the flashlight, and opened the camera app so I'd have proof. I inched toward the back, chest tight, breath shallow. I opened the door. Nothing. Just shelves and supplies. No Polaroid. I stood there, trembling, when footsteps suddenly echoed behind me. Heavy, deliberate. My stomach dropped. I spun around, phone shaking in my hand. The aisles were empty. The registers were empty. The parking lot outside lay drenched in rain, silent under the harsh glow of the streetlight. I turned back toward the storeroom, and that's when I saw it. A small handprint pressing into the metal door from the inside. A child's palm. The impression smeared faintly across the steel like someone had dragged it downward. I rushed over, my hand reaching without thinking. The print was there. Real. Ice cold. So cold it burned my skin when I touched it. I yanked my fingers back, heart crashing in my chest, and then, without sound, a word settled into my mind like it had been whispered directly into my skull. Stay. That was my last night at Circle K. By noon, I handed my keys to Chris. He looked at me for a long second, eyes duller than usual. He didn't ask for details. He just nodded and said quietly, "It doesn't bother you if you don't acknowledge it. But you did. My throat tightened. I feel it. That was all I managed. He didn't push further. I left, moved closer to Dad's hospital, picked up a job at a quiet bookstore, daytime shifts only. I drive to his treatments now without glancing over my shoulder, without feeling phantom drafts slipping through the car. For a while, I believed I'd left it all behind. But every night at 2:57 a.m., my dog, Max, stiffens at the hallway closet. His ears prick, his teeth bare, and then he growls. 3 low, guttural growls. Every time I freeze. I open the door, just to prove to myself it's empty. And it always is. Just shadows, stale air, and silence pressing down. But as I lie awake afterward, I can't stop thinking about Ethan. About that Polaroid. About the boy who never left his shift. I don't know where he is. I don't know what he wants. All I know is some jobs don't end when you clock out. Some places hold you, keep you. And sometimes, the silence speaks louder than the daylight. Respect it. Listen to what unsettles you. And when the knocking comes, don't ignore it. Because some stories never clock out. Graveyard shifts have a rhythm, a strange, almost secret music that only the people awake while the world sleeps ever really tune into. The quiet isn't peaceful so much as heavy, pressing in from every corner of the store. The hum of the refrigerators became a kind of background bass line. The chime above the front door when it rang broke the silence like a bell in a church. Sometimes a drunk stumbled in at 3 a.m., swearing that a hot dog cost too much and trying to barter like it was a pawn shop. I didn't mind it. Truth be told, I liked it. Nights like that gave me room to breathe, to think, and when it was slow, to crack open my textbooks at the counter. I was 26, halfway through nursing school. Every shift at the Circle K on Silver Creek Road keeping me just far enough from drowning in debt. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me afloat. That night was a Thursday, early October. Rain ticked against the front windows, steady and cold, coating the street outside with puddles that swallowed up the last yellow leaves of autumn. It was around 4:05 a.m., the dead hour, when even the last stubborn partiers finally gave up on the night. I was wiping down the coffee station when I heard the door chime. She stepped inside. Tall, drenched to the bone, her long black coat looked like it belonged to another century. Water dripped off the hem and pooled on the tile. Her heels clicked, sharp and deliberate, echoing against the empty aisles like something from an old noir film. Her makeup had run in streaks down her cheeks, and strands of wet hair stuck across her skin like spiderwebs. She didn't say a word. Just walked over to the coffee machine, filled a cup, grabbed a pack of instant ramen from the shelf, and set it all on the counter. Exact change clinked against the surface, her gaze fixed somewhere far past me. "Rain's brutal out there," I said, trying to sound casual. My voice felt too loud in the silence. "You okay, ma'am?" That was when she looked at me. Her eyes weren't red from crying. They weren't even wet. They were hollow, bottomless, like something had been scraped out from inside her. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, distant, like she wasn't really speaking to me at all. "My husband died last night," she said. "Head-on collision. I came here before the ambulance even arrived." I froze. The words lodged in my throat like stones. I fumbled for something, condolences, sympathy, anything, but whatever I said didn't land. She didn't even blink. Then she tilted her head slightly as if listening to something I couldn't hear. "Do you believe in punishment?" she asked. Her tone had shifted, less fragile now, more deliberate. I don't know," I said slowly. "I'm not really religious." She studied me for a long, heavy beat, then gave the faintest nod. "You should believe in it," she said quietly, "because it believes in you." She didn't move. She just stood there, coffee steaming between us. The store felt colder suddenly, as if the heater had shut off. My stomach tightened, my palms damp. I'd dealt with emotional customers before. Lonely people who poured out too much. People who wept at the counter. But this felt different. There was an edge to her presence, something that unsettled me deep in my chest. Then, all at once, her expression hardened. Her voice sharpened, turned brittle. "You're one of them," she said flatly. I blinked, confused. I'm sorry." She lifted a finger and pointed at the gum rack, the glowing hot case of taquitos behind me, the lottery machine by the wall. "All of this," she spat. "Junk, poison, and you smile while selling it." "Ma'am, I started, but my words stumbled over themselves. "You don't care, none of you care. Just like the paramedics, just like the priest. You look people in the face while they suffer and you smile." Her eyes bored into me. I felt myself edging back, my heel bumping against the bottom of the counter. My hand hovered near the emergency button, but I hesitated. "I didn't mean any harm," I said carefully, my voice thinner than I wanted. "I was just trying to be polite." She leaned in, her face close enough that I could smell the rain in her hair. Her voice dropped to a whisper, trembling but sharp. "You smirked at my pain," she hissed. "You mocked God without saying a word." Then she screamed, sudden, full-throated, shrill enough to rattle the windows. The ramen cup flew from her hand, shattering against the glass case. Scalding broth and noodles splattered across the display in a steamy mess. I lunged for the phone. She stormed out before I could even finish dialing. The glass door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing through the store before the night swallowed her whole. I just stood there, phone still in my hand, my chest hammering. 10 minutes must have passed before I even moved. No one else came in, just the silence, broken only by the hiss and sputter of the coffee machine. Eventually, I forced myself to clean up the mess. The ramen had left a slick of broth and noodles across the glass case, steam still rising from it, like the scene was refusing to settle. I tried to tell myself maybe she was mentally ill, maybe she was grieving, lost in shock. I wanted to file it away as one of those, "you won't believe this customer" stories, the kind you laugh about with coworkers. But I couldn't. Her words clung to me, the way she'd said them, the look in her eyes. They weren't random. They weren't grief. They were something else. When my shift ended, the sky was just starting to gray. Around 7:15, I walked out back to the parking lot, the world washed clean from the night's rain. Puddles shimmered and the pavement glistened under the early morning light. That's when I froze. Both of my front windows were shattered. Glittering glass lay scattered over the asphalt, my car seats soaked through. My stomach dropped. At first I thought robbery, but nothing was missing, just wrecked, violated. And then I saw it. On the driver's seat sat a photograph, the edges burned black, curling in on themselves. A wedding photo. The couple stood smiling beneath a white arch, but both their faces had been scratched out with something sharp, gouged until the paper tore. On the back, scrawled in red marker, were 3 words. "I see you." My hands shook as I called the police. They came, took the report, bagged the photo. One officer muttered about it probably being tied to a mental health call they'd had recently. A transient woman, unstable. When I described her, one of the younger cops flinched, said he thought he'd seen her walking near the river park, talking to herself. They told me not to worry, said it was likely a one-time thing, but I knew better. That kind of rage doesn't burn out overnight. And the look she'd given me, it hadn't been grief. It had been focus, precision, like I'd become the stand-in for everything she hated. I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing the photo in my head, the faces clawed out, her question about punishment looping over and over until my mind felt raw. 2 nights later, near the end of my shift, I saw her again. Through the wide glass front windows, out in the parking lot, she stood still as stone. Her coat clung to her skin, her hair matted wet against her face. She didn't move, didn't come in. She just watched. I didn't finish that shift. I called my manager and said I was done. She didn't argue, didn't ask why. She just said, "I understand." A month later, I moved, started working days at a small clinic, graduated from nursing school, tried to build something normal again. I buried the memory under routines, appointments, and paperwork. But every so often something cracks through, a shadow lingering by the gate of my apartment complex. A tall figure in a black coat at the edge of the road when I'm driving home late. Once a woman in the clinic waiting room smiled at me, but her eyes, empty, old, made my blood run cold. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's trauma, paranoia, some echo of that night replaying itself in me. But late at night, when the city goes silent and the hum of the fridge feels like the only sound in the world, I still hear her voice. Do you believe in punishment? And I wonder if it ever stops looking for you. Not every ghost is dead. Some people carry grief like a weapon, pain like a lantern, and they will wander until they find someone to blame. You can offer kindness, but sometimes kindness isn't enough to mend what's already broken. It's strange how one small moment can rip apart the illusion of safety you've been living under. Not a scream, not a chase, not even a violent struggle. Just a calm, almost casual confession from a stranger in a wrinkled gray suit. A whisper that settled in my bones and made me realize nothing was the same after. My name's Carlos Vega. I'm 24, working night shifts at the Circle K off Larkspur Avenue in Henderson, Nevada. I picked up the job to help cover grad school bills, and for the most part, nights were predictable. Quiet stretches of black coffee, small talk with the same regulars, and the occasional teenager trying to run off with an energy drink. I liked it. The solitude of the graveyard hours, the hum of the neon sign flickering against the window, the soft quiet after 2 a.m. when the city finally exhales. But October 3rd, 2022, that night cracked the rhythm. Something walked in that wasn't looking for a soda or a bag of chips. Something walked in that wanted to take away the little bubble of safety I thought I had. Technically, it was Tuesday morning. Most of Henderson was tucked away, the streets half dead under curfew lighting. I'd been on since midnight, running on stale coffee, reorganizing the chip rack for the third time, polishing fingerprints off the counter. That store quiet is its own thing, different from daytime noise. It has this hum, a stillness that presses into your chest and leaves too much space for your thoughts to echo. At exactly 2:12 a.m., the automatic door hissed open. I looked up, wiping my hands on a rag. The fluorescent lights caught him first. Tall guy, gray suit, wrinkled like he'd slept in it. His tie was loose, shirt discolored with stains I couldn't name. His eyes had that glassy shine, like he hadn't slept in days, or like he'd just come out the other side of something terrible. He didn't say a word, just drifted between aisles, shoulders slouched, lips moving like he was muttering or arguing with someone who wasn't there. When he finally came up to the counter, he leaned in too close. Close enough that I caught a smell. Bleach maybe, or sour sweat, or something I couldn't place but wanted to step back from. My skin prickled. And then, in this steady voice, almost like he was telling me a secret in church, he said, "I got acquitted, you know. Shot him right through the neck. They said it was an accident. A hunting accident." For a second, my brain shut down. My throat locked. I blinked, staring, thinking, no way this is real. You don't get confessions like that at 2 in the morning at a Circle K. I heard myself laugh, thin, nervous, the kind of sound that escapes when you're trying not to scream. Okay. That'll be 3:42. My voice cracked halfway through. He didn't answer, just kept his eyes on me, unblinking. Then he leaned in a little more, lowered his voice and said, "There was no accident." My stomach dropped so fast I thought I'd throw up. He reached into his pocket slow and careful and pulled out a few coins. Exact change. 3 dimes, 4 pennies. He placed each one down on the counter like it mattered, like each coin was part of a ritual. Then he slid them toward me with this faint, deliberate smile. And then he just walked out. Calm, not hurried. Didn't look back. The door slid open, hissed shut, and the hum of the mechanism filled the silence he left behind. I just stood there, staring at the glass doors. My chest tightened, breath coming in shallow little bursts. My hands were shaking when I finally dropped the coins into the register. The coffee machine gurgled behind me, sputtering like it was mocking the silence, and I reached over to shut it off just to make the noise stop. Then I grabbed the phone, crouched behind the counter like a kid hiding, and dialed 911. My voice came out low, almost whispering, like the guy might still be in the store listening. Somebody just admitted to murder, in the store, just now. The dispatcher's tone sharpened. "Sir, can you give me a description?" And I did, every detail I could pull out of my rattled brain. The suit, the eyes, the smell. The way he said there was no accident. Tall, gray suit, glassy eyes, tie hanging loose, shirt stained, no car at the pump. Just him, walking off into the dark. I stayed behind the counter until the cops arrived. 2 cruisers pulled up with lights dimmed, not flashing. The officers were polite, calm in that way that feels rehearsed. They jotted down notes, checked the lot, asked if I could identify him if he came back. One of them shined a flashlight across the pumps into the empty street. Nothing. Just silence swallowing the lot. They told me they'd keep an eye out. But there was no sign of him, just a shadow that seemed to vanish into the night. 2 days later, I almost dropped my coffee when 2 men with badges walked in. Not local cops, FBI field agents, dark suits, trimmed hair, the whole thing. They introduced themselves with steady voices and told me the man I'd seen matched a suspect tied to multiple cold cases. 3 states, violent crimes with a strange pattern, confessions, accidents staged too neatly, evidence that never added up. They asked to see the footage. I brought them into the back and pulled up the security tape. Together we watched the grainy black and white feed. There he was, walking in at 2:12, drifting by the racks, leaning in toward me at the counter. Every line he spoke came through clear enough. Shot him right through the neck. There was no accident. And then him leaving, as calm as he entered, the door sliding shut behind him. The agents exchanged looks but didn't explain. They just said they'd follow up on leads, thanked me for cooperating, and carried a copy of the footage with them. I told myself that was the end of it. But later that week, he came back. It was around 2:05 a.m., 5 minutes before my shift ended. I noticed movement on the security feed, front entrance camera. There he was. Gray suit, tie loose, just standing outside the door, not trying to come in, just waiting. My mouth went dry. I didn't move toward the glass. I didn't try to wave him off. I just locked the door from the inside and stood frozen, eyes flicking between him on the monitor and the dark storefront. He didn't knock, didn't gesture, just stood there for maybe a minute before finally walking away. Back into the night like he'd only wanted me to know he could return whenever he wanted. 2 days later, I quit the night shift. I couldn't do it anymore. I switched to mornings at the Trader Joe's by the interstate, the same hours I used to work part-time in college. The place is busier, safer, people around constantly. I drink more caffeine just to keep up with the pace, but it feels better than being alone in that silent box at 2:00 a.m. Still, sometimes I catch myself glancing over my shoulder, at the register, stocking shelves, even walking to my car. I picture him again, quiet, confident, smoothing his wrinkled suit, leaning close, whispering another confession in that flat voice. I've made changes. Cameras now cover my apartment porch, new locks on the doors. I don't call it paranoia. I call it trying to take back some ownership of my world. But some nights, lying awake, I'll stare at ceiling shadows and hear the hum of my fridge kick on, and my chest will seize with the thought that it's the Circle K door sliding open and he'll be there again. Gray suit, glassy eyes. There was no accident. but I'm alive. I kept going. Went back to school, finished my first semester, read through CPT chapters with coffee discounts taped in the margins. I've got new lights strung up in my apartment now. I laugh more with people. I function. Yet that night left me with something I never believed before. Fear isn't always a scream in the dark. Sometimes it walks in calmly, tells you the truth in a whisper, and leaves you to carry it. I had just dragged myself through a 12-hour shift waiting tables at the diner off E35. My feet were burning, my back was knotted, and the bun I'd tied neatly that morning now drooped sideways, strands of hair sticking to the sweat on my neck. When I finally pushed through my front door, Ava and Leo were still awake, their eyes glassy and restless from too many popsicles. "Mom, can we get real ice cream?" Ava asked, her small hands clasped together like she was saying a prayer. Leo chimed in, his little voice pitching high. "Please, please, please, Mom." My first instinct was to say no. After a shift like that, I always wanted to say no. My body screamed for the couch, for silence, for sleep. But when I looked at their faces so full of expectation, something in me softened. I glanced toward the window. The night outside looked calm, humid but still. The Circle K down on Cicada Lane glowed like it always did, that red and white sign buzzing faintly. It wasn't even 10 yet, just a short walk. Seemed harmless enough, and maybe the stretch would do me good. "All right," I sighed. "Shoes on, let's walk." I wish I could say I felt something wrong in the air, a warning pressing at the edges of my skin. But it wasn't like that. No shiver, no strange moon, no omen. Just another summer night in Temple, Texas. Halfway down Cicada, I noticed a truck parked beneath a dead street lamp near the gas station lot. Its hood gleamed faintly under the Circle K's lights. As we got closer, a man and woman stepped out from behind it. The man looked ordinary, trustworthy even. Collared shirt, clean hair, the sort of guy you might hand your keys to if your car broke down. The woman, though, was off. Heels too sharp for this cracked sidewalk, a blouse too white, too pressed for nighttime in our dusty town. Together they smiled at us like we were old neighbors. I felt Ava's small hand tense in mine. I pulled her closer without thinking. Leo tugged impatiently on my other arm, pointing at the freezer decal in the Circle K window. "Look, Mom, swirl cones." That's when the man stepped directly into our path. "Evening," he said, smooth, casual, like we'd just bumped into him at church. "Mind if I borrow your wallet?" Before I could even shape a word, a flick of his hand opened a switchblade. The steel caught the neon glow, flashing cold like lightning. My stomach dropped. But what froze me wasn't the blade. It was what I saw over his shoulder. The woman had moved fast, too fast. Her hand was clamped around Leo's wrist, tugging him away. Ava screamed, a sound that split the night wide open. And in that instant, exhaustion vanished. The ache in my back, the heaviness in my feet, it burned away. What was left was pure, raw instinct. I dropped my purse and lunged. My knee drove into the woman's stomach hard enough to knock the air from her. She stumbled, her grip on Leo breaking. He wrenched free and bolted. "Run!" I shouted, my voice sharp enough to cut. Ava grabbed her brother's hand and dragged him toward the store. The man lunged for me, but I caught the edge of a metal trash bin and swung it sideways. The crash echoed like a gunshot. His wrist slammed against the rim, the knife slipping free and clattering across the pavement. He cursed, doubling over, eyes wide in shock. I didn't wait. I didn't check if he'd get back up. They both darted into the alley behind the houses, swallowed by the dark like they'd never been there at all. I stood frozen, arms trembling in midair as if I were still gripping that bin. My chest heaved. The adrenaline buzzed so violently my vision blurred. "Mom!" Ava's voice broke through. She and Leo ran back, both of them crying, clinging to me like they thought I might vanish too. "Are you okay, Mom?" Ava asked, her voice tiny and cracked. I nodded, but the lie sat bitter in my mouth. Yeah, baby, I'm okay. But I wasn't. Not even close. We went inside the Circle K, my pulse still hammering like it didn't know the danger was over. The clerk, a skinny guy in his 20s with acne scars and a nervous twitch in his jaw, froze when he saw me. Call 911, I told him. My voice sounded flat, like it belonged to someone else entirely. He fumbled for the phone, hands shaking, while my kids clung to my sides. I tried to steady my breathing, but the air inside the store felt heavy, too bright. The police didn't come fast. We sat on the curb outside, Ava pressed against me, Leo's head buried in my lap. 20 minutes passed before a patrol car finally rolled into the lot, lights off, engine slow. I gave my statement, words tumbling out sharper than I meant them. The officer nodded, wrote things down, but his face stayed unreadable. Not urgent, not concerned. Maybe it was the lateness of the hour, maybe just me, a tired waitress with 2 crying kids and no knife wound to make the story bleed enough. The next day, it got worse. A detective called, voice clipped and official. He asked if I'd been involved in an assault the night before. Yes, I said quickly. I was assaulted. There was a pause. Then he corrected me. No, ma'am. A woman filed a report. Says you attacked her without provocation. Claims you tried to rob her. I laughed at first, short and bitter. But his silence told me it wasn't a joke. For 2 weeks, I was under investigation. They picked apart my life piece by piece. My bank account, my credit card bills, my hours at the diner. They asked if I was stressed, if I'd ever snapped at customers, if I had money problems. I could feel the judgment simmering in the air. They didn't say it out loud, but it was there. Single mom, long shifts, kids out late near a gas station. I thought I'd lose everything. My job, my reputation, my kids' sense of safety. Nights stretched long and empty. I barely slept. I sat in the dark, staring at the driveway, sure that truck would reappear. Ava checked the locks 3 times before bed. Leo wet the sheets again after months of being dry. We were unraveling. Then one afternoon, an officer called me back. His tone was different now, less suspicion, more apology. Footage turned up, he said. Different gas station, 3 nights before yours. Same couple, same truck, same clothes. Different parent, same setup. The words sank in like a stone. It wasn't me they should have been watching. That woman wasn't some poor victim. She and her partner had been circling highways, preying on people too polite, too trusting, too tired to expect the worst. People like me. When the detective finally cleared me, told me I was no longer a suspect, I broke down crying. Not from relief. The relief was shallow, fleeting. I cried because I knew what came next, explaining to my kids why the world was suddenly smaller, meaner, why their innocence had been chipped away by strangers in pressed shirts and fake smiles. I still walk Cicada Lane sometimes, but never at night. I keep my eyes sharp, shoulders tense, keys tight in my grip. I lock my doors the second I'm inside, but I've learned something I didn't know before. You don't have to feel brave to be brave. Fear doesn't matter when it's your kids in the balance. Some threats don't come dressed in shadows or blood. They wear pressed collars, lipstick, perfume. They smile like friends until the moment they strike. So trust your instincts. And if anyone ever dares to threaten your children, forget the quiet, tired version of yourself you think you are. You're a warrior. Use it.